The evolution of gunpowder to its ultimate limit has warned mankind of the terrible consequences of failure. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Thank you for coming to the channel and to another episode of Coronavirus War Room. So there's a lot been going on in the news, especially with antibodies and police brutality. I want to promote your channel and the things that you've been doing lately. I just got an email from Cliff High that some of his videos have been going down.
Really?
So there's censorship going on. So there's lots to talk about. So welcome to the channel. And for the ones that don't know you, introduce yourself and explain on how we met. And let's try to get some more subscribers that watch my channel to watch your content, because I think your content's very good and that they
appreciate
should subscribe.
that, and I just I had to take the mask off so people can see my face a little bit. But yeah, thanks for inviting me to the War Room, Paul. And I have been watching a few of your episodes, but like many of us, trying to keep up with all the content, I am behind on checking out everybody's stuff. Just trying to keep up with the research. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about lots of stuff today. Police, civil liberties is a big one this week, I think, with a lot of incidents that are happening. And I'll talk a little bit of science too. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, welcome to the War Room. So,
Colonel Cottrell, what's the show today?
So I was on. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Alan Keyes. He has a show called I Am TV. And he's a Harvard guy. All right, he's very smart, very smart, very nice, very humble. And we did 2 episodes, 1 hour a piece. I don't know when they air, but his production's like, he is like next level when it comes to production. He's got all the, like, it's almost like a studio. It's like a new studio.
Yeah, I'm planning on getting my setup set and situated once I'm about to move again. And yeah, I just want to wait before I set up a permanent studio situation. But what I got works for me right now. And I know you just moved, Paul. So
yeah. So I'm still setting stuff up, and and I'm kind of playing around with camera angles and stuff. Plus, because of medical school and studying for that, it's like, oh my God, trying to do this and that, it's tough. But what I'm going to do is that as we're covering more and more of the coronavirus and dealing with all the problems, I'm also, as time goes on, this situation will start to die out at least with the pandemic. The civil liberties side of this is going to continue for a while here. So still covering that, but as the science side of the virus starts to die down in terms of content, I'm going to start coupling that or supplanting that with new information that I'm learning in medical school. So the way I talk to people behind the scenes, and the idea is that as I'm studying different organ systems, people have been going to my channel and kind of trying to learn a little bit about science or biology about the virus. So they were basically learning virology and epidemiology. So the idea is just like give them a little bit of what I'm learning in medical school. So they're kind of like learning as I'm learning the
Yeah,
different organ systems. So I was I'm going to try that, see how that works. And it'll help me reinforce my knowledge from my studies, but it's also kind of like a team journey going through medical school. So it's like
that's cool.
medical school light, or something like that. But I'll see what happens. But
I think that's really an effective way to teach, and it reminds me of being in high school. And one of my best teachers was actually this Filipino lady who taught calculus, and she even admitted, she was the first to admit that she wasn't even the best calculus student in the class, but she was just such a good teacher and good communicator. And we would break off into these groups during free time and seminar, and one person, it was often me, but whoever would kind of lead the group and ask questions. People would ask questions, and it's a great way to learn, I think, is trying to explain it, because then you see where those sticking points are. And as far as med school and stuff, Paul, I think I mentioned this before, but I would love to get you on my show to talk strictly about productivity tips and just how you are such an efficient worker, because I do love talking about that stuff. But just to expound a little bit, I don't think I explained my channel completely. I am focusing on interviewing people right now. I got interviews with an ex-drug kingpin, an ex-Scotland Yard detective, PhD. Everybody knows that, of course, Colonel Cottrell here. I've got several authors that I've interviewed and I'm talking to. George Webb, I know a lot of your fans. You share a lot of supporters and viewers with George Webb, Paul. So yeah, people want to check that out. But I agree, Paul, as far as the civil liberties go, I don't think it's an inverse relationship, but as the attenuation happens with this virus and it's, we get a hold on it, and I don't think we're there yet, but we're getting there. The civil liberties, aspect or pillar, to use your word, is going to become more and more the focus and more important, I think.
Yeah. So so the subscribers, I highly recommend, please go to Addy's channel. It's Addy Ads. I'm going to have all the links in the description box. Please subscribe so you help him out, grow his channel so he can, reach a larger audience. Share it on social media. In this kind of community, I started my channel with very few viewers, very few subscribers. I was averaging about, maybe I was doing awesome if I had like 50 views of video, and I'm very grateful for the help that other channels that were way bigger, saw potential in me, such as Oppenheimer Ranch and Leak Project. The Leak Project was actually the first one that actually published the material I was talking about, and then I did a lot of episodes with Oppenheimer Ranch. But they were the ones that helped me at the very beginning. Then there was BP Earthwatch, saw some of my content. I created some viewers there. So there were a lot of channels that said, hey, there's some good content here. Please go and help this person out. And now I'm at a stage, because of their help, I'm at a stage where I'm reaching many more viewers, many different platforms, getting a message out of trying to save our civil liberties. And if Rex from Leak Project and Oppenheimer Ranch didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now. So I feel it in this kind of community, this level, that we all have to pass on the baton to a smaller channel to try to grow it, to reach, for them to reach a larger audience. So it helps everybody. It's not about one person. It's about a whole community, expanding the awareness, increasing the market of ideas, on these platforms. And when we do that, we become less fragile. The big fish, they get knocked down, like David Icke's or London Real, or even Cliff High. Some of his videos are getting knocked down. But these really, really known people on the internet, even Alex Jones. I mean, we're all going to be Alex Jones if we don't stick together. So for us to be more resilient, more anti-fragile, we have to do this. The really, really big channels that are trying to help me, like Stefan, they realize that, I need to grow bigger too. And I realize that I'm in kind of like that middle range, and I have to do what individuals early on helped me with. And that is, I'm trying to help you. And eventually you'll get to where I am, and you'll pass on the baton to someone else. And it's just, it's one person after another that does this. And eventually you'll start to see this movement become much, much more resilient. Another platform that another person I'm going to have on is Mike Decon. And I go on his show. He's got a smaller channel, but he's super funny. And he's got like the radio voice.
Yeah.
Perfect radio voice. And he's from California. So I'm going to have him on. And he has a sidekick. The sidekick is Michael Hideous. And we just have a long conversation about a bunch of stuff. But I'm going to try to promote his channel and grow that too. And we all have a part to play. That's the whole thing. We all have a part to play. But some individuals out there, there are channels that do some good work, but they're egotistical, and there's a lot of infighting within within this type of community. That's not what it's about. It's about trying to help each other, because it's about the market of ideas. And if one of us goes down, then someone else is still on the battlefield, doing the work. But my channel could go down. I mean, I'd say some crazy stuff. All right. But I have a plan that if it does, what to do. All right. But, other channels can take the message and keep on going. That's what I mean by that. We become more resilient. We become more robust. Because it's easy to take one of us down, but they can't take everybody down. And so if we can bring everybody up to the 900,000 subscriber level, that would help so many people, that the voice would be really, really, really loud. So my goal, Addy, is to get you to the 40,000-50,000 mark, and you can do the same with someone that you see that's at the 1,000 or 2,000 subscriber mark, and you just pass on and pass on.
Gratitude for that, Paul, and I appreciate and I do consider you being a mentor of mine in this realm and other realms too. So nothing but gratitude for that, and just passing it forward. And I think it's so important. And this is something actually I talked about with George Webb when we spoke yesterday. He asked me about kind of my name and the origin of that and stuff like that. So I was just talking about mythology and Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero's Journey, and that story, that concept of the hero's journey, and how he has to make that that voyage, that traveling, that voyage to the unknown, and having a master or that mentor relationship is a part of that hero's journey. And I think what differs nowadays from back when guilds were a thing is that you have to be really self-motivated about finding mentors, and it's in mentors plural, right? In the olden days, say we were doing a blacksmith, you would be my blacksmith master. Dr. Cottrell, and then I would be your apprentice for 7 years. And after 7 years, I would be, a master blacksmith, and I would be able to support myself for the rest of my life. But now it's a lot more loose and a lot more, formless, and you have to find your mentors elsewhere, and more than one mentor too. So yeah, it's nothing but gratitude from me, Dr. Cottrell, and I definitely try to maintain my standard of production quality as high as I can, and I'm trying to get better all the time too. I think you have a really great follower base, your fan base, your viewership. I think they're a very diverse group, and very open-minded, more or less, and intelligent too, and they're curious, regardless of how smart they are, they're intellectually curious in what is going on, and they're concerned. So yeah, I do appreciate that, George. Excuse me, Paul. And yeah, like I said, I was speaking with George the other day about that, just that the mentorship role, and how we need to support each other. And I do agree that it can get very cliquey on YouTube. And actually, George mentioned that too. This idea of, well, it's just a human nature thing, I think too, that you think there's only so much money in the world, or viewership, or just having that scarcity mindset, as we call it, is not conducive to being in this arena, or any arena really. Even if it's not true, I think you have to kind of brainwash yourself, and I think it is true in this arena, to have that abundance mindset, because when you have that, it just sets you up for easier relationships with the people you're working with.
Yeah, no, I agree. What's weird is that as I'm moving along, marching along on the whole medical educational route, having those mentors to get me into a surgical residency. Anyone that's listening that is in medicine, especially doctors, MDs or DOs, they had to have a mentor to get into a certain specialty. They needed to understand the path, because the paths are so different for different specialties. And you have to, you literally, because of residency is an apprenticeship. Automotive engineering is an apprenticeship kind of thing. For me, it was like I started in plastics. I started in a plastics factory working on an injection press, and then I eventually was promoted into the CAD CAM design department, and then I started designing molds, plastic molds, injection molds, and doing the cutter pass to cut on the CNC machines. And then eventually moved up into part design and system engineering, and then designing the whole car. And being in the studio, in the clay studio and all that. So, and I did amazing things, but it was an apprenticeship type scenario, not just the education, but having that work experience and apprenticeship kind of style of thing. But a lot of industries have lost that kind of thing. Germany is still very heavily on the apprenticeship side of things, very, very heavy, especially in the automotive, where they,
Wow.
they get someone in there early, and they work their way up as usually it's like you're a draftsman first, and then you move your way up, and then eventually you become a system engineer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but that's the way to learn it, and that's how I learned automotive. But so let's go into the meat and potatoes of the coronavirus war room, let's talk about police brutality. So recently there was an incident in New York City with the NYPD being very abusive on the side street.
Yep.
And it was starting to hit. Yeah, it was. I saw the article from the Washington Post and the New York Times about it. They showed the video where the police officer is grabbing and headlocking the guy, and then there was another one trying to help, and then the police officer started hitting him in the street, and then another police officer, and they weren't even. It didn't look like they were that they had the proper uniform on. They almost looked like they were undercover. It was weird. So,
I
but
noticed that.
you know, at least the two that were hitting the guy in the street, I couldn't tell with the one that was in the headlock.
Yeah, he
But
just looked like a guy in the street. He was just in street clothes.
yeah. But it's just the point. There is an abusiveness that's taking place. 1 week before that, I saw. I wasn't there. I saw a video of someone filming it. There was a protest, not a very big protest, at City Hall in New York City. It's right off
Really?
Broadway. It's right by the 6 train station by City Hall.
I didn't see that.
And they broke it up. The police officers came in. They were doing it all. Everything was peaceful. And they broke it up and said, under the governor's orders, they can't do this. All right.
Wow.
And so you have the inability to peacefully assemble, which is a constitutional right. They can't stop that, especially if it's under a peaceful scenario. But they're doing it. Then there was a video recently that was showing New Jersey using drones to tell people to stay away, and to stay away from individuals, and go back home and stay in shelter in place.
Yeah, they're doing like the announcements over the loudspeaker. Weren't they?
Mm-hmm. So this is a psychological. This is kind of like a psychological war here that's going on with these drones.
Yeah.
They're priming us. They're having us try to accept the voice authority in the sky, on these drones, and they have that camera, so they're looking at you and they're saying, "Go home, go home." This is
eagle eye.
Yeah, the eagle. Yeah, the eagle eye. So some people will just look at that and say, okay. Others are like going, hey, this is getting a little too much. And there's people like myself that are saying, where's that gun? So we should blow it out of the sky, because I don't believe it's that the police officers have the constitutional authority to be able to do that. Now, just because people need to understand, just because a law is passed by a legislature or a city ordinance is passed, doesn't mean it's legal.
Can you explain that, Paul? Because most people wouldn't know what you mean by that.
Okay, so you have a legislature that tries to pass a certain bill, right? And let's say it passes the House and the Senate within the state legislature, and then the governor signs the bill. Well, just because he signs the bill doesn't mean it's constitutional. It is a law that's signed, but if they made a law in the legislature that states Dr. Paul Cottrell can't observe Judaism, then that would mean that, just on that law, that if I observe Judaism, then I am breaking the law and therefore could be prosecuted.
Well,
or
did
at
you
least
see what
charged.
happened with the Hasidic Jews in New York?
Well, I'll get to that. But just a short, to end the point here is that it's our constitutional rights that are inalienable. You cannot take away our constitutional rights, no matter what the legislature thinks, no matter what the governor thinks. And that's the big point here. And it's that the Juris Doctorates out there, the lawyers out there, need to start stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, enough is enough, and we're going to sue the hell out of you for this, because you have just crossed the line. So that's why we have the balance of power of the 3 branches of government: the judicial, the legislative, and the executive branch. Right now, we're seeing an overreach on the legislative branch and the executive branch, and we see somewhat the judicial branch not engaged. Now, if they do what they're supposed to do in terms of the judicial branch, it will be found that all these things that the governor and the legislature, the executive branch and the legislatures are doing are unconstitutional.
I saw that in Ohio, a small business owner sued the state for the right to keep their business open, basically. And I don't know how that's going to go, but people were just talking about it on Twitter, and the second order and third order effects of this pandemic are going to be felt forever in this country.
Now, going back to what you were saying about the Hasidic
Yeah.
thing, are you talking about the funeral?
Yes.
Yeah. So, here again, the de Blasio. So in Judaism, especially in the Hasidic arena, when you have someone that passes away, you're supposed to do the burial within 24 hours, if possible. In some cases, it's not possible, but in most cases, it is possible. So you're supposed to do the burial in 24 hours, and there is a mourning process that takes place where there's a lot of prayers that are said. It's called sitting Shiva. And if a person in the community that's somewhat well known passes away, then the whole community usually mourns, especially if it's like a Rebbe or a really known rabbi. Not just the immediate family is sitting Shiva,
What's a
but
Rebbe, Paul?
a Rebbe is you can view it as a rabbi for the Hasidics.
Gotcha.
It's the same thing. So it's like their teacher. You were talking about mentors.
Yeah.
That's
Rabbi
like
means teacher, right? In Hebrew.
Right. So typically the word rabbi is used in the sense of they're more, you want to say they're like the PhDs. They usually go to they usually go through formal education, studying Talmud for many years to become a rabbi, ordained rabbi. Ribbis, they not necessarily go down that path, and they're a little bit more mystical. They're more on the Kabbalistic side of things versus, let's say, the Talmudic side of things. So you can view like rabbis as a little bit more the more studious, law focused, Talmudic focused, while the Ribbis are a little bit more folklore focused.
Gotcha.
So there you follow the law the same way, but when you're teaching it to the masses within the community, the rabbis usually teach it through Talmud, while the Ribbis teach it through a mystical story. But it gets to the same point. So some people would say that the Ribbis are less educated, but it's not that they're less educated. It's just a different way of teaching it. It's a mystical way of teaching it versus a more
textual,
more judicial, more Talmudic way of teaching it. But when they die, usually the whole community mourns. So now you got de Blasio saying, "Hey, you can't do this because of coronavirus, the CCP virus and the Fauci virus and all this." And he was getting. De Blasio was getting all upset, and I just personally think that it's time to get out of shelter in place. It is a real virus, all right.
Yes.
Nature, though, actually, if you're looking at the epidemiological curves, have shown that nature is a lot more robust than we originally thought. I was expecting that the first wave would have been a lot worse. Now, it could have been a lot worse if it wasn't for shelter in place. How much did shelter in place help? Probably quite a bit. But we've been in shelter in place in New York for so long that if it's not working by now, it's not going to work. So, enough is enough, and we just got to, move on and just take the chances.
What was your estimate, Paul, for just casualties? Guys, I think I just checked, and we were at I think 250K. Give me one sec here, but because you said you had predicted it, and I made a prediction, but it was actually the first week we talked, Paul. So we're at 279 right now, 279,000 worldwide, and
I was focused on the United States. The United States has 77,000 deaths as of right now. Now that's more than the federal. That was more than the Confederates lost in the Civil War. All right, and
I didn't know
more
that.
than. And that,
are you sure about that?
Positive. So in combat, in combat deaths.
Oh, okay,
Combat
okay,
deaths.
okay.
When-
Very. You gotta be. Yeah, you gotta
in
add
combat,
that.
in combat deaths. So, and Korean War was 33,000. Vietnam War combat deaths was 47,000. World War One, I'd have to look, but
I think it was like 150K, and World War II was like 450K, around there. Let me check World War One though. I know World War
No.
II was like 400K.
But combat,
that was for us.
Combat deaths.
Oh, just combat. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Because there's like
I
casualty.
apologize.
There's casualty deaths there too.
Mhm.
But I'm talking about actually combat deaths. So, and those wars were over many years, right? So we this has only been 2.5 months or whatever. So it's been a lot, but I thought it was going to be much higher, much higher. I think the shelter in place really dampened the curve big time. On top of nature being much more resilient than most people thought with this bioweapon.
What can you expound on that a little bit, Paul? What do you mean by that?
About nature being more robust against the bioweapon?
Yeah, and I
Okay,
love the
so
Nassim Taleb language, by the way.
all right. So when someone's developing a weapon, they don't really understand how much power it has and the duration of that power until it's unleashed. When they tested the nuclear bomb in Los Alamos in the desert, they had an idea, but they didn't know what sort of destruction it could cause until they actually dropped it on Hiroshima, right? Then they had no idea about the radiation effects on the body. And then there were lots of tests after the war where they were trying to battle harden, American soldiers and nuking them, literally nuking them and having them walk into a cloud, thinking that, well, they have like an immunity to radiation now.
Like you can build it up slowly.
I mean, it was crazy stuff because they didn't understand nuclear power and radiation sickness. I think it's something similar here. They had an idea of what bioweapons were, but this is the first time that we know of that something so virulent was released that spread across the whole world, affecting so many different nationalities, so many different climates, so many different population types, comorbidities, population densities, and all this.
Demographics.
The demographics of it. There are so many different things in the real world that may have a negative feedback loop that leads to a realization that, you know what, that virus, yeah, it is deadly, but when you unleash it, nature has a way to have a negative feedback on it and weaken it. It's not going to spread as fast through the Midwest, partially because the population density isn't there, and that the way the mass transit doesn't really exist.
There
just
is
the
no
car.
mass transit.
Right, exactly. But you put it in a scenario like New York, where there is mass transit and high density, and then you got a problem. So this is what I mean is that it's not a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah.
How to deal with this. We have to be really careful with Boston and New York because of the way people travel and the population densities. You don't have to worry about this so much in Montana. Now, Michigan does have a problem, especially in the Detroit area. And that, but most areas of the United States, I don't think is going to have that big of a problem. And when we say problem, people have to put it in perspective. New York has like 19,000 deaths, all right, out of that 77,000 that are in the United States. Michigan, at least in the Wayne County area, has about 1,600 or 1,700 cases. All right. So you just put it in perspective.
Yeah,
New York, I
Oregon
meant New York
has
City.
like
And when I said New York, I meant New York
150 or
City.
something. I
Yeah.
don't know. Not even. I think
Right.
it's in between
So
100 to 200.
this is the point. Is that the population densities and the way people travel is a negative feedback loop for most of the nation, and that nature is much more robust than what they thought with this virus. And there was no way they could have modeled it. There was no way they could have tested it to really know worldwide what
With
this thing would
certainty.
mean. This is this is kind of like a beta test for the weapons program to understand, does weapon program work? Now, I keep on talking about this with on my channel, talking about, well, there is an acute phase and probably a chronic phase. And we're seeing the acute phase right now. What is the chronic phase of this? As it starts to attenuate and die out, the ones that did get it and had severe cases, the high fibrotic scarring, what are the long-term effects of their pulmonary problems or their immune system problems or even neurological problems? Is there long-term effects? That's a big question. We don't know. We have some suspicion. I suspect that there will be long-term effects of individuals that have had these, really bad cases.
Well, they're
Now,
seeing the organ damage, right?
yeah.
Scarring in their lungs.
Yes. So as they get older, they'll probably have complications to COVID-19. They'll go just like 9/11 when you had these first responders.
Yeah, one died. What, like last year? One
Yeah,
died, right?
Yeah, they all these pulmonary, asbestos-like diseases, cancers too. But something similar, I think, is going to happen with COVID-19. People are going to have a chronic problem. There's going to be a chronic part to this, but there's another part that's chronic that we don't really know about. Does the virus stay dormant, especially in like G0 cells, like T cells, memory T cells, and does it
like
reactivate?
Shingles does too.
Yeah,
because shingles stays in the spine and
something like that. That's what I'm
lies
saying.
Dormant. My uncle actually just had his shingles flare up a couple weeks ago. But
something like that. I mean, shingles has a different mechanism than what I'm thinking, but it's something like that it stays dormant and then it flares up again. And what does that mean? I don't know. We haven't gone down this road, and we don't really fully understand. This is why we need to start asking questions and start prosecuting to find out what else did they put in this virus. I suspect there's something more in it than just what we have found so far, but it's getting to the point where it doesn't matter. There's enough information to realize that they messed around with nature, and the people that did this shouldn't have done it, and they need to be prosecuted. And the next step is not to look at all the details of the genome and what did they do, but to understand that there is an acute phase and a chronic phase. We have to figure out how to treat that. So that part is important. But we need to start really focusing on the civil liberties side and make sure that they don't do these forced vaccines and push for ideas like, well, if you don't have the antibody, you can't go to work, because how do you get the antibody if you've never been sick, right? And then they'll go, well, we're going to have COVID-20 and you don't have the antibody for COVID-20, and therefore you have to have the vaccine. And it's an annuity for these businesses where they're just going to say, okay, you're going to have to take your vaccine, and thank you for the $200 billion that we get annually. I see that we got to follow the money. We have to follow the people that we have to start prosecuting the people that develop these programs at a supranational level. It's not just in the United States. And there needs to be some sort of Nuremberg type trial for people like Fauci, Birx, and Redfield, and Dr. Shi, Lieber, anyone that was part of the program, anyone that was part of, transferring technology to China.
Collaborating.
Even if it wasn't even related to the virus per se, just helping the enemy is treasonous.
Aiding and abetting.
Yeah. So there's this domestic enemy, and there's the foreign enemy that we need to really look at and start to prosecute.
You had a great analogy with the atom bomb and just not knowing kind of what we're playing with, collectively us humans are playing with. And a scary idea just came to me when you mentioned that, of what if it is a beta test and multiple, it's a multinational beta test that they know about, and the whole thing is an act. Now, that is really scary. Do I think so? I don't know, because just the way that leaders have reacted, it seemed like a total surprise to most governments. I mean, in China, they had the fortunate happenstance of getting it first, so they're getting ahead of the curve, so to speak. And yeah, I think that was a good analogy. But yeah, they're talking about this article I read. One of my viewers sent it to me on my Discord about a nano ID on children, and just as how is it affecting the body in various ways too. And on children, there's rashes showing up on their feet, I guess, and blood clotting in organs, like in and around organs.
Right. And well. Then there's a study that was released that was talking about anticoagulants will help some of these patients. So you have this accumulation of dead red blood cells, or even disease cells that's sticking together and causing blood clots, right? So anticoagulants will help kind of thin that out and reduce these blood clots. This is a sign that this is not just a pulmonary disease. It's a blood disease. This is, and that blood disease, so it's a blood disease attacking the red blood cells. It's attacking the T cells. So that's, a blood disease, but it's also an immune disease. And you're having a neurological problem too. So this is when we start, this is what I mean by the chronic phase. What does this mean? Is it just the cells that are already differentiated that are being infected, or is it going all the way into the bone marrow and affecting the stem cells? Because those red blood cells are produced from a stem cell.
How do you think stem cells could be used in this, Paul?
Well, what my point was are the stem cells we have adult stem cells in our bone marrow that help produce different they differentiate into different cells into white blood cells or red blood cells. So if the stem cells are infected, then all further differentiation is affected. So I don't think that the stem cells are being infected, but we need to research that. We need to cut those femurs and study or do bone marrow tapping and take a look at the bone marrow and see, is this virus affecting the stem cells? If you start having infection in the stem cells, then you have a major problem, because every single cell that's going to be coming from that is going to have a problem.
How do you fix that?
You can't. That's like cancer.
Yeah.
That's like the problem that people have with leukemia. Yeah. The stem cell is diseased, and every cell coming from that is also diseased. So you have to somewhat how they do it, for at least for cancer patients, is they radiate the body and kill the bone marrow. You have no more bone marrow, and then they do bone marrow transplant, and hopefully that transplantation helps, and you don't have the problems anymore. But that's you're talking about a death sentence there.
Yeah.
There is no way to fix that.
Yeah, no doubt.
But that I don't think it is. I don't think it's affecting the stem cells, but it could. We just don't know, and that's why I'm saying there's the chronic phase of this we don't have a good understanding of. But my gut feelings is that it's affecting red blood cells that are already differentiated. It's not from the stem cell, but it's already differentiated, and they're fully matured, and they're being infected.
Mhm.
And I think they're fully matured antigen presenting T cells that are being infected. And the question is, when the red blood cells start to die out and get filtered out, and let's say you have a low viral load and it's only infecting the red blood cells, eventually you'll just shed it out of your body. But if it's going into T cells, we do shed T cells, they die out too, but some of them actually stay around. And if those are infected, the ones that are staying around in the tissue, not the ones that are dying off, then do we have kind of a dormant kind of thing going on with this virus? I suspect that's what's happening. And, maybe they stay dormant within these memory cells, these T memory cells. I haven't seen any literature about the B cells being infected. But so we have, T cells and potentially B cell memory cells that may be the harboring of the virus. Other tissues might be just in G0 and have it. And until they get out of G0, then they start to produce again.
Yeah, and this dormancy can last a long time or a short time too if it is happening, and we don't know that. Like with chickenpox, the shingles don't appear until middle age. So that's kind of scary too. It's like, what if these people who recovered in 20 or 30 years, something pops up?
Well, that's why I'm starting to think that this discoloration type presentations that you're talking about is a peripheral nervous system disorder. It's almost like I'm not so sure that the virus is attacking the nervous system. It could be that our antibodies, because you got to remember, we make an antibody and it tries to attack it. It doesn't work. The antibodies go away. It's trying to make some more. So we have like bad antibodies that don't work very well against the virus floating around in our serum, our blood serum.
Those are your soldier buddies who shoot the wrong way and do friendly fire and don't pay attention.
Yeah, sort of. So and it might be that our immune system is attacking. It's not clear yet. It's not clear that if our immune system is attacking the peripheral nervous system itself because of this, this virus activating the immune system, and so it's an autoimmune kind of problem.
Yeah.
Or is it the virus that's attacking the actual peripheral nervous system itself? I am more on the side of that it's our immune system response to the virus that results into an autoimmune-like peripheral nervous system disorder. And that's what you're seeing. But a lot more studies need to happen on that. We need to know that if the virus is going into the nerves, then it's not like an autoimmune problem. But if the virus is not going into the nerve, in the peripheral nerve, and infecting it, but the body is attacking the nerve, and there's lots of diseases that fall into this category. We have to attack our immune system, and we have to attack the virus, because the virus is attacking other tissues, but it's activated our immune system to be attacking us.
In that case, the defense would be almost completely exogenous, right? It's like your body can't even defend itself.
Yeah, I mean, some of these kind of like autoimmune system disorders, they can last for years or forever. Others may not last; they may die off. They don't have they're not in the body for that long. You might have it for a few months, or.
I was thinking about, Paul, is what if like you or I got this virus, or somebody, hypothetically, not us, say there's somebody in, I don't know, Texas or wherever, and he's a virologist or a microbiologist, and he gets the virus and he manages to isolate it in culture. and kind of incubate it. Like, wouldn't that be worth like billions or millions? Like, what would happen then? Because like it wouldn't be that hard for someone who's a professional microbiologist, virologist, who works in labs to isolate it in their own home, right? I mean, if they just spit or get their infected bodily fluid in, it wouldn't be that difficult, right?
Well, you could, yeah. I mean, if you had an infected individual, it'd be very, very easily,
Yeah.
to get to be able to isolate and to multiply it. I mean, all you need is epithelial tissue that has ACE2, the right growth factors in a petri dish, or and you can easily magnify this thing and purify it.
I mean, I did it in my microbiome class in high school. I remember we went around the classroom, and I still can't remember her name, man. And it's been bothering me since the beginning of this. The beginning of this pandemic is I can't remember my microbiome teacher's name, but it'll come to me. And we would go around the classroom, around the school, and go on surfaces and take the a swab, put it in a petri dish, and kind of let it grow. And so it's pretty basic as far as microbioscience goes. But I was just thinking about the possibility of a citizen to do that. What kind of leverage that citizen could have used for them or against them. I don't know. It's a hypothetical, but
let's put it this way. Let's put it this way. It's a lot easier to do that than make a nuclear bomb, because you can't get the purified uranium.
Yeah, or the plutonium.
Or plutonium, right? So in this case, it's as long as you have either a surface or some sort of biological sample retrieved, you can infect cells in a petri dish and have it grow. You have to know that the average person couldn't do this, because they don't know. The average person wouldn't be able to read the technical papers to do it, but someone that has a little bit of science would be able to read the papers, and you would have to procure the growth factors and the cell lines to do this. And this is just standard laboratory stuff.
Yeah. And
so
the reason
the key is
because
just getting the sample.
The idea of like crowdsourced science, and that's why it came to me, is like say somebody does get a hold of this weapon and has control of it in a petri dish in their living room in their basement or something. How would they use that? Could they use that to try to as a weapon and try and sell it, or could they use it as to try and find out how this microbe works better, to understand it? And the reason I brought this up is because of the government's almost complete control over science and how it's become a problem, and how, because science is so important to how it developed over the last century. And Eric Weinstein makes this point that theoretical physicists are largely responsible for our world today in terms of technological innovation. And since that, science has become so corrupted that it just came to me the idea of like, what if somebody just got sick of it and tried to figure it out themselves? Maybe what if they just went to the hospital? Maybe he's, pretty good shape, he or she gets sick themselves, isolates themselves, captures the virus, gets better, and then studies it by themselves in their basement or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but here's the problem: is that if you start putting too many restrictions on being able to get biological cell lines or chemicals, then you would only be able to do it if you had the laboratory license. I don't know, you would stifle innovation. I don't think we should regulate biology too much, but there needs to be things put in place where these weapon programs cannot be done. There's a fine line of like how much regulation needs to be put into science and technological discovery. And if you put regulation, then you're going to stifle it. But not just that, you might be pushing a certain type of science
Yeah.
and not allow other sciences to evolve.
And that's what Weinstein said too. He's saying that blue sky science or
Blue sky science, right? That's a good term.
yeah. And if you want to explain that as well after I finish from a point here, Paul, is well, blue sky science is basically just science for the sake of science. You know, there's no immediate financial return on investment that can be seen. And actually, stem cells, since we were talking about stem cells, came about this way. It was just discovered accidentally, and a lot of science comes about like this. But it's almost gone away, as far as I understand, because of the money, right? Because the money is the number one priority.
Well, it's that, and maybe even I'll call it medical tyranny. You know, if you had too much regulation, then individuals may not be able to invent new ways of treatment that are antithetical to, let's say, a vaccine treatment. You know, if you say, okay, we're only going to let vaccine laboratories get these types of materials to be able to invent, and these non-vaccine labs can't get these materials, then you can't
There's no oversight.
develop, right?
It's like the FBI, right? And that's what people are talking about this too, is like there's no oversight on our intelligence services. And I'm not agreeing with everything Fox says, but I do think they're making a good point with that. And it just seems like the FBI runs the country. I don't know. I mean, that's my impression.
Well, I'm not sure if it's the FBI or it's the CIA. I don't know. I mean, theoretically, CIA is not supposed to be working in the United States, but I think that they do. I think they supersede the FBI.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. What do you mean by that, Paul? Is the FBI is technically supposed to be ahead of the CIA, but they're not, right?
Right. At least domestically.
Yeah.
I mean, the FBI is not supposed to be involved in foreign operations. The CIA is foreign operations, but the FBI is domestic operations. But I think, if you have the Smith modernization happening.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, if you have that domestic propaganda thing going on, then you've blurred the lines between the FBI and the CIA. Because how do you know that domestic propaganda is not part of a foreign operation?
Yeah. How do you know anything?
Well, that's the point. It's just that things is getting so wired together that's just why I keep on saying it's time to go to a pre-9/11 day where we truncate the surveillance system. We truncate the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, the TSA, all these agencies that grew right out of 9/11, they all need to be shrunk down. I'm not saying eliminate, but there's no reason for this bloated government that we have.
Yeah.
We killed the bad guys. My generation, Gen X, was asked not only in Desert Storm, which was in 1991. We took out and pushed out Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. All right. In Operation I'll get to that. But my generation, Gen X, pushed out and pushed back Saddam Hussein in Iraq. It was also my generation that was called.
Wasn't that Donald Rumsfeld?
No, well.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Right. So, but the point that I'm making here is that my generation was asked to do a lot of things in the Middle East, and we did it. All right. We made it happen in the Middle East pre 9/11 and right after 9/11. We were called right back in and said, okay, now it's Iraq and Afghanistan. It was my generation that made that happen. All right. We killed the bad guys, but we were never able to go back to a pre 9/11 day.
And we never came back home either.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's just, when I say we haven't gone back to a pre 9/11 day, it's an all-encompassing statement. it's not just one thing. It's an all-encompassing umbrella statement on many different topics, especially the surveillance topic.
Mhm.
They use the situation to blow up government. They created this monster, the institutionalization of these agencies, to a point where now they find reasons to surveil you. They find reasons to we'll just watch you, and when you do something wrong, then we'll catch you. And they go, well, if even Eric Schmidt from Google said, well, yes, we're watching you, but if you have nothing to worry about, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you have nothing to worry about. That's not what the Fourth Amendment says. The Fourth Amendment says, it's very, very, no improper search and seizure. And not only that, I am innocent until proven guilty. All right. And you're not, you can't just surveil me, and say,
wait till you fuck up.
Right. You got to fuck up first, and then you got to prove that. That's the way the system works.
Otherwise, everybody's going to be guilty, right? Because if you wait around, I mean, everybody's committed a crime at some point, whether, it's something super petty as jaywalking or whatever. If you watch something forever or somebody forever, you're going to catch them doing something.
England used the same reasoning as Eric Schmidt said.
I think they're worse than
England.
us,
Well, no, but England was, trying to look for contraband, to prevent the revolution. And so they were going from home to home and doing improper search and seizure. This is what improper search and seizure clause, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, that actually popped into my head when you were discussing it. And I was like, I don't know if I should bring it up or not. But that's annoying when that happens, then I forget to go back to it. That's why you see me writing down sometimes. So yeah, it happened like pre-Revolutionary War. The redcoats would just walk into people's houses and just take whatever they wanted. And in wartime too, this happens, but that's a slightly different context. So
yeah, but the point is that they're eroding the Constitution, and the judicial branch isn't stepping up to the plate and preventing it. They were supposed to step up to the plate and prevent it. Then because they haven't done that, then
that shouldn't be forgotten,
right? But but the thing is, because the judicial branch is not stepping up to the plate and preventing this tyranny from the legislative and the executive branch, it is up to the citizens to step up to the plate and prevent it from happening. But it was my generation that was called to duty to do things that the government wanted us to do in a foreign land, and we did it. And we never were given that pre 9/11. What's the good word I'm looking for? Going back to a pre 9/11 day after we killed the bad guy. And they just think that, okay, the BioPatriot Act is signed, and we grew these agencies, and they should always be that big, or they should go get bigger. No, you build up an agency because you need it, and if you don't need it anymore, you take it down. But what happens is there's scope creep, and this scope creep you start seeing with even the police force. I could understand drones being used on the battlefield, but now what is happening is they're viewing the battlefield in our cities. This is the problem. This is that the police officers are being deputized like they're little military soldiers. They're not military soldiers. I don't care how much fucking training they have. They are not military. All right. There is a reason for the military to protect a nation from a foreign enemy, and the police to make sure that someone isn't raping someone and someone's not stealing from the grocery store. That's what the police are for. All right, not to run around with drones and carry AK-47s and military grade equipment.
Yeah, but that's what they're doing now.
Yeah. But what it is, what the reason is because there's scope creep, because no one's saying no.
Yeah,
people need to say no to this.
They're testing our boundaries. They're testing how far
should.
they can go with it. With any relationship.
Well, yeah.
And when you're dating,
Yeah, well, if push comes to shove, you know, the government's going to get fucked. They're going to get fucked, and they're going to get fucked hard. And, you know, they don't understand that people, the point I was making in my, you know, about my generation is this: my generation did what we were asked to do, to do our patriotic duty in the Middle East. We did it. We accomplished it. And all those soldiers, men and women, you know, made it happen. Mission accomplished. All right. And then the government shits on my generation like they are. That is unacceptable. And I'm telling you, there is a hate building in my generation that is going to start tearing people's heads off, and they don't get it. The people that like Governor Cuomo, he doesn't get it. He is going to be targeted. I'm not saying like he's going to be targeted like in a like a death type situation. I'm saying it metaphorically in the sense that if he runs for president and he tries to run for president in 2024, he's going to be completely eliminated in the primary because of this. He's pushing for forced vaccines. His career will be over by doing that. And I suspect, at least peripherally, that I'll be involved in the takedown of Cuomo. Not centrally, but peripherally. But Cuomo's career is not going to survive this, especially if he does the forced vaccine program in New York. But there is a hate that is starting to brew with my generation about this tyranny that is happening with the government. And you know, we did our job. We did what we were asked to do to kill the bad guys. And it is time to go back to a pre-9/11 day. And this surveillance grid needs to just completely get shut down. And we're not going to, you know, we can't have this forced vaccine program and you know, decaching and E7 surveillance and social scoring and, you know, all this stuff.
Social scoring, man. That's some Black Mirror stuff right
there. Oh,
yeah.
I never watched Black Mirror. I mean, everyone says that some of the things I talk about is on Black Mirror. I've never seen it.
I have seen the first episode, but it was literally like a dude and a pig having intercourse. So I was like, okay, I'm not about this.
Sounds like Governor.
I mean,
Cuomo.
The concepts I can understand.
It sounds like Governor Cuomo.
As being very interesting, but yeah, it just, you know, I'm quite picky with how I, you know, watch films and TV shows.
Well, I'm quite picky on who I fuck. So,
and you're quite picky about your governors too. I didn't know that he was supporting forced vaccinations. Do you know anybody personally that is? Because I don't. I haven't seen anybody that's supporting it.
Unfortunately, there are citizens that are supporting it.
Just
because
sheep, man.
You know, they're going, you know what, I'm waiting for, I've heard people say that people call into the show and say, well, you know, I'm against it's like a guy that calls in, let's say, and says, I'm against the forced vaccine program, but my wife is saying she's, you know, she's waiting for the vaccines to come so everyone can go back to work. So they have this mindset that, oh, the vaccine will allow us to be safe, and therefore we can all go back to our normal way of doing things. And that is what they want you to think. That's what the powers want you to think. They want to put you in a fear mode, and they have a solution for you, and that they're going to give you this vaccine, and that will cure it all. And what it does is it just creates a money stream for the pharmaceutical companies, and there is no efficacy yet proven out for the actual vaccine. They're going to do shortcuts with the safety protocols with the clinical trials, and you know, we're not only that, we're
to get it out faster.
And not only that, it's a new platform. It's not like your normal garden variety type vaccine the way it's developed. We have no idea what the long-term effects of a messenger RNA platform is, and what are the possibilities of putting a Trojan horse in the vaccine to do harm to our body, especially our genome, because they sure as hell do it with our own technology. So what are they doing?
Yeah. So what makes you think they won't do it with a vaccine if they're doing it with our apps and in our phones and stuff?
Right. Because if you look at what they've done in the past, they have done something nefarious behind the scenes later down the road. And I think that they're going to do that. I think they're going to do that So
what I have a huge problem with, and if I have to pick one or the other, I know what I'm going to pick, but I don't like the feeling that I have that I can't criticize my government and still work for my government. I don't know if you share that feeling, or if you have people that work for the federal government in your family, Paul, but I am thankful for the government and how they have allowed my family to have a very high degree of social mobility, particularly through the military. But I don't like the feeling and the thought that I can't critique my government at all if I want to ever work for them. Like, and I have a fear that that's the case, and I just don't want that. And if I have to pick, I'm going to pick free speech. Okay, as much as I would love a cushy government job like anyone else.
well, our government is we the people.
Yeah,
It's that's the thing is that people, you can be against the governor, you can be against the people, the majority of the people that are elected to office. If they're not doing what the citizens ask them to do, then they are against the citizens, and it's the citizens that are the government. They are the employees.
They work for us.
They are our employees.
Yeah.
We are not their serfs.
Yeah. Right.
And this is the problem is that once they get into office, they think that we're a serf. We're not. And there's nowhere in our Constitution that, states that once you become the governor, then you have subjects.
Yeah, right.
Your citizens are now subjects to you. Because what has been happening with some of these governors, it's like, I'm doing an executive order. I'm, from the king of New York, that all citizens must stay indoors, or you will be, quartered and tarred and feathered. I just, dude, I mean, this guy is tyrannical and unconstitutional. I can understand up to a certain point, but when you have to take risks. There's a point that you have to go out and just take risks and live your life, and not be a germaphobe. Is it a dangerous virus? Yes, it's a dangerous virus. Do we understand all of its dynamics? No, but I'll tell you what, losing your constitution is a hell of a lot more dangerous than the virus is. And that's why I'm trying to convince people that we have to do Operation Occupy America. If we occupy America, and protest at your local level, then you're going to start seeing the citizens engaged. The people that have been elected to office will start listening to the concerns of the citizens, and eventually we'll start seeing policies put in place that are what I'm trying to promote, and that is more freedom. Not to have this Biopatriot Act being instituted, and to go to a pre-9/11 day. And that pre-9/11 day also means the reduction of the military grade equipment from police, with the police force. Not have those drones. They should not have drones ever. Drones should not have spectral dominance. That's what they're trying to do. The police officers are trying to have spectral dominance on the citizen.
In every dimension.
Yeah, and you're using your tax dollars to do it. No. I think it's the right of the citizens to start shooting the police officers and shooting down. I know this sounds very, very inflammatory, but that's what they're doing to the citizens. Look at what just happened. If you don't do what they tell you to do,
Arbery. No, that wasn't a police officer. Excuse me.
Well, the point that I'm making is that what they're saying is that if you don't do what we're telling you to do, we're going to put you in a headlock and beat you up. All right. Well, wait a minute here. You're not supposed to be able to do it, and the Juris Doctorates aren't suing. So what's the only recourse that the citizens have? It's shooting. That's why we have guns. That's the reason. The reason why our founding fathers gave us the right to bear arms is what is happening right now. And it is stupid not to use that right. If you have a government that is pulling you out of your house and forcing vaccines on you or forcing you to do this or that, it is your right to shoot them. I don't care what law is written. It's not constitutional. And the Constitution is above the laws that are passed, underneath it. So, the tyranny of these police officers, there's really good police officers out there. It's not all people are bad.
Yeah.
Not
Paul,
all.
I want to interrupt you there. I'm really enjoying this combo, but can we take 5? I have to take a
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm gonna grab a drink too.
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Okay, so we were talking civil liberties.
So I mean, basically the point that I was making is that the police officers are becoming tyrannical. And when they become tyrannical, it is the right of the citizens to arm up and fight against the police officers. If your life is in danger because of over abuse by the police officers, it's your constitutional right to shoot back if your life is threatened. That's what the founding fathers, that's the reason why we have, because the police officers are an extension of let's say the state and the governor or the mayor's edicts. And those edicts could be unconstitutional. And when your life is in danger, you don't have time for it to be in a court, especially if the court's stacked against you.
Quick anecdote on police. I was telling you actually a quick story beforehand, but I didn't get to it because I wanted to share it on air. I was walking the other day and I decided to shoot a video with my phone. Didn't plan on it, didn't bring my GoPro. I was walking in a residential area, decided to turn around and go back towards the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And I'm recording a video, right, talking, and this police car pulls up beside me, not directly 9 o'clock, but probably like 10 o'clock or 11. And it drove alongside me. And the video's on my YouTube channel if anybody wants to see it. I don't turn the camera until the end. And so he follows me or goes alongside me for like a minute and a half. And just staring at the police officer. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? I have no idea. Like, and it's just us. It's just me and him. And finally, we get back to the main road. So there's more traffic there. So people start, there's people walking and stuff. And then this person, and it turned out to be a woman police officer because I heard her voice and I didn't see any face because the windows were tinted. Turns her attention from me to some guy on the other side of the street who's walking the opposite way. Mm-hmm. Asking him where he's going, asking him where he's been. And I'm just like, what is going on? Like I mean, this is speculation. Obviously, I don't know what everyone was thinking, but it seemed like they were sizing me up, wondering what I was doing.
Why do they need to know?
I don't know.
Because it goes back to the idea of improper search and seizure. Just
let me finish, Paul, quick. And they sized me up, and maybe they didn't see that I was an easy victim, so then they switched to someone else, or rationalize that, oh, this is why we're following this guy. But yeah, it just made no sense. There's no rationale behind how you could explain why a police officer was following me for almost 2 blocks.
This is the point I'm making. This is that there is this scope creep, and they think that they're above the law. And they are not above the law. And I think that it's going to get to the point where it goes kinetic, especially when they're starting to force these vaccines and people are going to say no. And then the governors are going to say that police officers, you have to instill law and order.
I hope not. I really hope that's.
I'm not too worried about the military getting involved, because I think the military will stand down. I think the military, they have an oath to protect us and the Constitution. Police officers don't do that. Police officers do, to my understanding of a police officer, they do not have an oath to the Constitution. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong on it, but I do not believe that police officers state an oath to uphold the Constitution.
Well, they are legally allowed to lie to you, and I don't think many people know that. But they are completely within their right to say anything they want, to manipulate you, to try to get you to do a crime, to try to get you to confess something that you didn't do. Anything they say is legal. Like in lying is not legal for them. So keep that in mind. And that's another thing too, is for me, it's like I still get tempted to be polite to them sometimes.
Well, you should be polite to them. You should be polite to them.
For me, it's just,
here's the problem.
There's no point in walking in that minefield.
There's two different, there's different, it depends on the scenario. Most of the scenarios, they pick off people individually. Where are you going, son? Type thing. Yeah. It's a different scenario when there's a group of people protesting peacefully. There's a pack, and it's packed.
Yeah.
All right. And in the individual scenario, your best bet is just to be quiet, because they have the power. There's a power imbalance problem there. They have the power. You just be polite, and you just know your constitutional rights. And if they start to be too belligerent, you can basically say, "What's your badge number, officer? I want to see your superior."
Ask them their name. Ask them for their ID.
Yep. Because that's your constitutional thing. And they go, well, and then they'll back off. Then they usually back off.
They look for victims. They're like predators, seriously. And humans are like this. It's a very primal aspect of predators, is they look for the weakest member of the pack, and they don't look for a fight. They're similar to criminals in that sense. And I talk about this because I shared my story of getting jumped in college on my YouTube channel, if anybody wants to see that. But people who are muggers, they don't look for fights. They don't look for guys who are going to fight back or girls who are going to fight back. Likewise with police officers, they're not going to harass you if you know where your boundaries are. But if you don't know where your boundaries are, they're going to push and push and push. And they see you as points in order to go up the scale, go up the ladder. Now, granted, not all of them are like that. They're not all bad. There are good, honorable policemen and policewomen. But just my experience, man, they just make things worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if it's in a protest type situation, and they try to, break up the protest because the governor doesn't like what he's hearing, or the powers that be don't like it, it's not acceptable. And I think it's going to get to a point. I think it's going to get to a point that the police officers are going to get bloodied, because there is an anger that is starting.
I think it's starting to build, and it's
a pressure cooker. Yeah, it's a pressure cooker, in that and them doing these drones, them pulling people out of their homes or beating them up on the streets. that is a catalyst for them to be going home in a body bag. You know, and there's the power balance then shifts to us, because we will have more um, um, force. There's more kinetic energy with us than they are with them, even if they have military grade equipment.
There's way more of us, you know?
Yeah. So I mean, it's either they're on our side protecting our constitutional rights, or they're going to go home in a body bag, because I'm telling you, that Constitution is not going up in flames. It's not.
Yeah.
People don't get this. People don't understand that we have passed the Rubicon, and that any governor, legislature, even judge that thinks that they're going to erode our Constitution, they have another fucking thing coming, because it's not going to happen. We are not going to lose our civil liberties. And I don't give a damn if there's a virus or not. There will be enough people out there that start raising so much hell that there's not enough guns in their arsenal to stop the citizens from rising up and tearing down these institutions that they erected right after 9/11.
You know what I think is interesting, Doc, is you mentioned how initially when this pandemic exploded globally in everybody's consciousness, it was the women who, you know, it clicked for them right away of the dangers of it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I feel like it's almost swung back to like the civil liberties side. The men are more aware of the dangers of that, and the women are more trusting of what the government is saying. What do you think?
Well, I think that the motherly instinct is very powerful. It's a natural instinct that is. I think the ones that are going to lead the movement are going to be the mothers, not the fathers. Even
with regards to the civil liberties?
Yeah. I think that push comes to shove, because because you got to remember the social networks of women are far greater than men.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and they know all the vaccine damaged families. They've heard the stories of they have, Susie, is on the spectrum, or Sally's on the spectrum, or Johnny's on the spectrum. They know who in their community have been vax injured. Yeah, the guys don't know that much about that
story that I came to knowledge about recently, about this baby. Woman brought a baby in for a vaccine, I guess, or a couple, and they gave her 3, 4, I don't know how many. It was a handful of vaccines. Immediately, the baby started just acting really weird, started crying. And the mom brings the baby back to the hospital. The hospital says the baby's fine. The hospital gives the baby back. And this happens a couple times where they're bringing it back and forth. And the reason for this was the hospital didn't want the baby to die in their care, because then they would be liable. And the baby eventually did end up dying in the hospital's care. But it just goes to show you an extreme example of the business of vaccines and the indifference of the effects of them many times.
Oh, they don't care. They don't care if they hurt children or not. They don't even test it properly. They have no idea what the synergistic effects are when you give one type of vaccine with another. They don't test for it. And a lot of pediatricians are starting to see that they're, especially the ones that have been working decades, and they're increasing the scheduling, the amount of vaccines that are in the schedule. They're starting to see in their practice that more and more individuals are getting on the spectrum, and there's a correlation. These pediatricians are seeing there's a correlation between the number of vaccines that you're giving early on in development and spectral, these autistic spectrum disorders.
How many vaccines did you get, Paul?
I don't know the number. That's maybe why I'm against, maybe that's why I ended up the way I am, is because I was vaxxed.
I mean, I've just had the basic ones that I can. My parents were never really into the yearly.
No. Neither was my parents.
They're smart.
But here's the problem: is like medical school. You have to go through the annual flu. I mean, so like people don't realize that people that go into medicine, they're force vaxxed. And then did anyone survey the people that are in the medical professions?
So you're going to have to get some then, Paul?
I have already. Because, going to medical school, you have to have it. You have to have these vaccines. So I had to have a whole slew. I had to have a whole slew of new vaccine shots.
Wow, yeah, I didn't know that. In order to, be a medical professional, you had to.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it
Oh, yeah.
makes sense, but yeah, you can definitely see
But it's no way
over
near the
abuse.
number. It's no way near the number that they're giving to kids. See, here's the problem is that kids are developing neurologically at a very fast rate. And
Yeah.
some of these vaccines are detrimental to certain groups. We don't know why, though. That's the problem. We know it's happening, but we don't really understand why. Why this one group is getting it and this group is not. So so the literature, if you just look at the data, it'll say, well, maybe it's genetic. Well, maybe it's actually you gave it this vaccine with this vaccine in the third month of development for this type of cohort group, and that's why it happened. That's the point that I'm making. That there's not enough studies done to understand why this is happening, and we need to do that. But the vaccine advocates, they don't want to do that because I think they realize that there is a problem and just sweep it under the rug and just assume that it's not there. If you don't test for it, how do you prove that it's not it's happening?
Yeah,
it's harder.
You can't
it's harder
manage
to prove it.
what you cannot measure, right?
Right, exactly. And they don't want to measure it. They don't want to measure it. And then once you start measuring it, you'll start seeing that there are problems. And that doesn't mean that there isn't benefits of vaccines. There are benefits to vaccines.
Of course.
But
Jonas
Salk, but later,
hero.
but doing it later in life, I think is better than, super early in life. And that scheduling, my generation didn't have that advanced scheduling. That advanced scheduling started in '86. So we didn't have the spectrum disorders that we're seeing today. So, and who knows what happens with this new vaccine? I mean, that's a scary thing, What are we going to do? COVID-19 vaccines for newborns? Are we going to go down that road? I mean, that might be. We might. So
I mean, we would just get, repeats of that story that I just said, I think.
It's
dead babies.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad what they're doing. It's sad, and it's just like, just cough it up. The way they view it, it's almost like they don't even respect life anymore. It goes back to the idea that maybe we've lost our spiritual soul in this country.
Oh, let's talk about this, Paul, because I wanted to talk about, I just wanted to ask you, because I think you would have an interesting view on this, just the metaphysics of, and we don't have to go there now. We can kind of dovetail into it, but the metaphysics of viruses. But yeah, I think there's and we mentioned this on our last roundtable Saturday, almost like a new enlightenment, age of new enlightenment that I have heard talked about a little bit recently, and a consciousness awakening that's going on, not just in people like you and me, Paul, who are so absorbed in this, but I think everyone, it's like in the beginning, like people tried to ignore it with alcohol and drugs and stuff. And that's all cool because we're all in a very stressful situation, but you only can run away from yourself for so long, especially when you're in your house all day, right? And we're not even in jail, right? We live in these wonderful houses and all this wonderful resources we can use. But yeah, well, where did you want to go with that? The spirituality aspect of this whole situation.
Well, I think the almighty dollar. Everyone's chasing that, and they're getting fooled by hold the gold. They're chasing the monetary dream, and that has eroded our spirituality. And I think that when you erode the spiritual component, then your view on life changes. It's not as sacred. People that are more spiritual, more religious, they view life, it's a sacred thing. But now when you're just, if you don't have a spiritual component or a spiritual core, then you can just say, you know what, 10 million people dead. It's no big deal. You know, there's a certain point where you just don't care.
It's a statistic,
Yeah. I
as
mean,
Stalin said.
yeah, and I think that that's part of the reason why these forced vaccines are happening is that we've lost kind of our spiritual soul. You hear this Bill Gates saying, you know what, we need to truncate the population. We have to reduce our population because we're running out of resources. You know, this is what I'm talking about. He's lost his spiritual soul. You know, he's
You know what I
lost.
noticed with him recently, Paul, is he's making gestures way more recently. It's like he's trying to be more charismatic, like trying to get people to, you know, it's like he's upping his salesmanship, like because he does use gestures. I've noticed,
Definitely,
in his interviews. But this interview the other day, I can't remember if it was CNN. It was from Seattle. He was live broadcast, and he was just like doing this, like every time he talks. He's like. You gotta believe me. Like, you know, I know what I'm talking about. It's like, bro, stop moving your hands.
The more he does it, the more he realizes that he's not
a magician.
Well, well, that too. But I mean, the more he does it, he realizes that people aren't buying what he's selling. You know, it's just a blue screen of death. That's all he's selling is a blue screen of death. You know, he's
the blue screen of death.
Yeah,
the red ring of death.
You know, I mean, but you know, people that you know used to be on Windows 97.
Yeah.
You know, they would always, or 95 or 98. You know, they would always crash and give you the blue screen of death. That's what he's gonna get.
Man, that was the very first one did I even use that, or was it XP? I think I used it for a very little.
But even XP gave you the blue screen.
Yeah.
But the point is that they you know, he's promoting something that people don't want to buy, and he'll start moving his hands more and more and more to try to convince you. This is a psychological thing that he does. That's one of his weaknesses.
Yeah, I've noticed
body
that.
language weakness.
If you listen to what he's actually saying, like he's not really saying a whole lot, you know. And
I don't think that he's as intelligent as people say he is. I really don't.
Made that point recently.
He's not.
On Twitter. He said, I don't know who it was, but he basically made that he brought forth the idea that we look up to the tech giants too much, the tech billionaires. And he's saying that they just got lucky, a lot of them, in the fact that their interest was in tech. And
if I was to
make them out to be bigger geniuses than they even are,
I think he would have been an interesting professor in economics to talk to. Yeah. I think he really wanted to go into economics, you know, and then it led it, you know, the whole tech thing. But I think his personality is more of an economist personality. He just happened to be at the right place at the right time in the birth of the personal computer. But in terms of, you know, he is a coder, you know, and he learned code, you know, at an early age. But in terms of like unique thoughts, I think Steve Jobs was more of a unique thought guy than Bill Gates. But Bill Gates was more polished. You know, Steve Jobs was a little bit more street smart. I always gravitated to Steve Jobs more than Bill Gates. I mean, I understood Steve Jobs' personality more than Bill Gates. But Bill Gates is a little bit more polished. He's, he had to be smart to get into Harvard. I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah, right? He's a smart guy, no doubt.
No, he's not a dumb guy, but he's not as intelligent as people say he is.
Or omniscient.
I mean, he's not,
or
I mean, he's not. He really isn't. And where he falls, and it was Balmer. It's Balmer.
Who's that?
His sales guy.
Oh, I don't know.
Microsoft that ended up taking over the company right after.
That's not Paul Allen, is it?
No. Paul Allen was his business partner, but the sales guy was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Balmer or Palmer, something like that. But they were having a discussion. So the CEO, once Bill Gates stepped down, the head sales guy took over, All right.
Mhm.
And I think that's Ballmer. He was doing a documentary, and he was asked a question about the early stages of email. And Bill Gates was saying something on the order of, "Oh, that's impossible. We wouldn't be able to, do email because it would take so much memory."
And then Dr. Shiva showed up.
Well, I don't know about the Shiva thing, but the thing, but the thing is that it would take it has too much storage. It would be a problem, and and that you have to manipulate. But you got to remember how Bill Gates learned computers was that memory was very precious.
Yeah.
And
Extremely
Ballmer,
expensive.
yeah, right. And Ballmer was saying memory is so freaking cheap it doesn't matter now. That you don't have to be efficient. So this is the problem with Bill Gates. He is too much of a mathematician and doesn't understand that. And this is why Steve Jobs was so much smarter than he was. This is that you don't have to be mathematically precise, because a chaotic system doesn't have to be mathematically precise, because it'll go into an equilibrium. And so the problem with Bill Gates, his Achilles heel, is he thinks that A plus B equals C. And Ballmer was basically saying RAM is so cheap it doesn't matter. And Ballmer was, basically, a hick. He wasn't Harvard. He wasn't, he intellectually he was much lower on the totem pole than Bill Gates. He wasn't a coder. He was a sales guy. All right. But it was the sales guy that had the street smarts to say, you don't have to have the perfect code. It could be, like, for example, a good example is what happened in World War II with the Luger, the pistols.
Yeah, the Luger was the pistol of German officers, so Nazi officers, and it was highly coveted by Allied soldiers, because if you could get your hands on a Luger, it meant you killed a German officer.
Right.
So it was a war trophy.
Right. So Germans are very precise people.
Yeah.
This is where Bill Gates comes from, all right? And they're very precise. But the thing is that if you're in a war, if you're in the battle, and there is a lot of dirt, you're going to get dirt, and the mechanisms in these weapons will seize, and they won't fire. So you have a looser tolerant weapon, and you could have the dirt in it, and they'll still fire.
Like the Russian Papasha, the PPSH, that thing,
or
never
the
jammed.
the AK-47. You dip it in water
after World War II,
and it'll start shooting, no problem. So so they designed a weapon that could go through it wasn't precise, but it was more usable. And this is what Ballmer was saying, is that you don't have to be precise, you just have to be good enough. And so this is the problem with Bill Gates, is that he's too mathematical and not understanding
too linear, you think, in his thinking?
Too linear with his thinking, and he's too mathematical, and he doesn't understand that opening the tolerance band of things actually makes the system more robust instead of tightening the tolerance band.
Yeah. In terms of like physics, you think that he is thinking about efficiency too much, like he wants to maximize efficiency way too much?
Yeah, definitely.
He seems like that, doesn't he?
But I can understand why. I can understand
really
why.
left brain, right?
I can understand why he is that way, because he was brought up in an environment where you were trying to store a lot of data in a very small space, and you had to pack it, and you had to be efficient.
Well, that's how computers work, right? And coding, it's binary, right? Yes or no.
Right.
And that's extremely linear.
Right. But at the point, though, if you look at code now, there's code. Most coders do not write in a very precise way. There's a lot of redundancy in the code. It's not packed.
Oh, it's not the most beautiful code.
It's not the right. It's not written
succinct code.
Right. It's not the most elegant.
But it gets the job done.
But it gets the job done, and it's good enough.
I see what you're saying.
But he was brought up in the way that he didn't
Has
have
to be
the luxury.
perfect.
He wasn't brought up in the luxury in that you could have that waste of space.
Yeah.
So he thinks in a very precise way, and he doesn't understand that opening tolerance actually makes the system more robust instead of tightening the tolerance. And he's falling in the same trap that the Germans fell into with their preciseness of their machinery.
Do you think he's a sociopath?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a God complex. I think that comes from coders. You know, they have this idea that that because they're creating something that a lot of people don't understand. And probably the same thing happened in the Middle Ages where people couldn't read. So the ones that could write had the God complex. They had the God complex versus the serfs that couldn't read. I think it's very similar. The ones that can't code, the ones that code think that they are God. They have a God complex to the serfs that can't code. So I think that has something to play into it. And then when you get to a certain level like him, where you have billions of dollars, then you start, then you can start pulling levers of, what, I don't like, population shouldn't be at 9 billion. I think it should be below 1 billion. But there is no evidence to state that we should be, dropping our populations down.
Do you know what the Georgia Guidestones are, Paul? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And their number was 500 million. When I found out about that, I was so like, wow, that is weird, man. Some random group of people anonymously made this monument somewhere in Georgia. And it's basically guidelines for humanity's survival in an apocalyptic scenario. For anybody who hasn't heard about it, I urge you to just go to Wikipedia and check it out. It lists
I think
the Georgia Guidestones.
I think those Guidestones are, I don't think that the individual that actually put them up was for the Georgia Guidestones. I think it was a warning that there are people that think this way. Oh. See, people think that the erection of the Georgia Guidestones was to promote a philosophy. I think they were put up to warn us of the philosophy.
That's a very interesting take. I've never heard about that. Yeah, because they wouldn't tell you that was coming, would they?
Right. If you really are trying to promote an agenda like that, you would keep it quiet. So I think there's enough circumstantial evidence there on those stones to assume that it's a warning and not an edict. See, people are reading it like it's like the 10 Commandments. I don't think that's it. It's almost like it's a warning. It's a warning.
Some people are thinking this way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. So.
Yeah.
That there was a faction that knew what they were doing that broke off, and they were trying to warn people.
Some white caps that wanted to stay anonymous.
Yeah, something like that. Something on that order. Mm-hmm. I don't, and everyone's thinking, oh, the Georgia Guidestones are, this is the evil. It's an evil plan.
Yeah.
And it's a monument, I think, to not to promote the plan, but to try to stop the plan, to try to inform people. Now, why is there a fact? Why is there a two factions within that group? Why was it fractured? I don't know, because this was I think they were erected in the 80s, right? The 80s. Right?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. Yeah.
So but they. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? It might be just a clickbait. It's that version of clickbait.
It's very masterfully done clickbait. That is the best clickbait I've ever seen. Well put together. A lot of effort went into it, it seems. So whoever made that, I applaud them. But yeah, it's just so interesting because nobody, you don't learn about that in history class, do you? I never did. And I mentioned this with George too. Not only that, but just the activities of the U.S. and the Central America, South America, Eastern Europe. Like you don't really hear about these in schools. I didn't. And that's the thing too, is I think everybody's understanding of geopolitics, civics, and history is so different based on who their teacher was, where they went to school. So it makes understanding all these things that much more difficult, and makes it that much more important for people to do their own research.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not. I think the Georgia Guidestones it's a warning, but he's playing. Bill Gates is on the other side. He's the one that's trying to institute what the warning is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're
I don't like
we're
Bill
up to 8
Gates.
billion people now, aren't we?
Yeah. Is it 8 or I thought it was closer to 9?
Oh
I
wait,
haven't
you
been.
might be right actually. It might be
Is it 7.8 or is it 8.7? I don't know. I stopped looking. I don't think it matters because I come from an engineering background, and I believe that yes, there's going to be problems that come up in society. But the thing is that engineers figure out a solution to the problem, and usually we become more efficient. So this idea. See, this is that linear thinking that that mathematical thinking that he has. I believe that the power of solution isn't to reduce humanity's numbers. The power of the solution is to find better technologies to make the world more efficient. And we are an exploring need. We are an exploring people. We have barely explored the ocean. I can envision having civilizations underwater.
Atlantis, dude. I've thought about that before. That would be insane, man. It'd be like
we
Star
could
Wars.
we could easily do that. Or I'm shocked that we haven't colonized the moon. We can do this.
With the ocean, like that would protect us from warming for a long time, wouldn't it? If it gets too hot in the surface, we'd go down.
Not only that, you could have these like pillar-like functions that would grow food up at the surface, and then you would be able to bring them down into the community below, and so
and you could turtles, fish. It would be almost an unlimited supply of fish if you're regulating the ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. If there is that demand to eat those types of organisms, then there is going to be a farming of those organisms. And then it's going to populate more of those species, just like chickens and cows. We didn't have as many chickens and cows before we started farming, so we started having, livestock
chickens are
farms.
great.
So we're going to have, so my point here is that engineers of all different types are going to be the problem solvers of these social problems that they're talking about. All right. But Bill Gates, he doesn't think like an engineer. He's not an engineer. He's a coder. And when people say coders are not engineers, all right, they're not. So, but they're more like writers than engineers.
Yeah.
But Bill Gates, or mathematicians, maybe you can put him in the mathematician category too. But Bill Gates, he doesn't think like an engineer. He thinks like a mathematician or like an economist. And a lot of these econometric model types, they usually fail in trying to really grasp the true dynamics of the system. And they work really well if you have good historical data. And
how would an engineer think about it differently, do you think, Paul, from
about the population?
The way Gates is thinking about it.
Well,
just in terms of fixing.
Well, yeah. I mean, so Bill Gates's premise is that you have to reduce the population because there's not enough energy. There's not enough resources.
Yeah.
Well, the last I looked, we have so much hydrocarbon. We have enough energy for the next 1,000 years. So that alone, hydrocarbon alone, we have way more energy than we need.
Auf 1000-jähriges American Reich.
So we got to see, so we have the the hydrocarbon thing isn't a problem. In terms of water, we just scratched the surface of desalinating the ocean and technology. And they say, well, it's not cost effective because of the energy that is needed to do that. Well, that's where the engineers come in. And if we're tapping into solar energy that's free and storing that energy using battery technologies like Tesla's using, and advance those types of technologies, and using carbon nanotube technologies to help with the them being catalysts to help transfer electrical energy, then you don't have a problem with desalination. So you can just name the problem that he thinks we have, and engineers can find a solution to. But again,
what do you think about what
he
Peter
thinks
Thiel
linearly.
said about engineering as a, he said the best thing to do, I guess what was it, like the 80s and 90s, or he's saying now is to go into computers, whereas like back then, which isn't that long ago, going into engineering would have been a mistake. What do you think about that?
Wait, Peter Thiel said that going into engineering is a mistake?
So he was talking about a
say?
specific time period. I believe it was the 80s or the 90s. He's saying back then the best decision would have been to study computer science. But I mean, nowadays we're seeing such a huge encouragement for people to go into STEM fields, maybe even over computer science.
Well, here's the thing is that computer science is a mathematical discipline.
Yeah.
Computer science is also an electrical. Computer science is electrical engineering and computer programming. Computer science is like this all-encompassing term, and inside that is computer programming. Inside that is data analytics, computational, numerical analysis.
IT security.
There's a lot of things involved in computer science. Quote science. It's saying what is computer science? The science of computers.
Yep.
Okay. What does a computer do? Well, or what is a computer? A computer is code, and a computer is an electronics. All right. What do you need? You need computer programmers, and and you need electrical engineers. So this computer science is a big catch-all phrase.
Umbrella term.
Yeah. So you wouldn't have computer science if you didn't have electrical engineers, because those electrical engineers were the ones that designed the chips and the powers and all that. You wouldn't have the advancements in storage technologies if it wasn't for electrical engineers. Yeah. So just the premise that if he's saying that going into computer science in the 80s was more important than other engineering disciplines, I think he's being very myopic, because you need chemical engineers, you need electrical engineers, you need mechanical engineers, you need nuclear engineers, you need aerospace engineers. Aerospace was getting really big in the 80s. Yeah. The advancements in fighter technologies.
But now, Paul, would you go into aerospace engineering with how regulated, just that is? It seems like I don't know, just going somewhat back to government regulation.
Yeah, I think because of my upbringing from being in Detroit, I would have stayed in automotive. Yeah. It really depends on where you are and what kind of engineer you'd be. If you're coming from California, you're going to be a primarily electrical engineer, or you go into computer science. You're not going to, or aerospace. There's big aerospace in the West Coast. But if you're coming from the Midwest, you're primarily going to be in mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on your environment that you're going to be in. If you're on the East Coast, there's a lot of opportunities for being a chemical engineer, especially in the pharmaceutical industry. But there's chemical engineering in the petrochemical, where it's more industrial chemical type engineering. There is not, people think that computers is like a really high tech thing. Computers is not really high tech. All right. The most high tech product that is made, that the United States makes, that an average citizen can buy, is a car. Everything else is bullshit, because there's no product out there that has as many engineers and as much number of people working on the product that an average person can buy. It's not a house. It's not a refrigerator. It's not a laptop. It's not your Oculus. It's not the cell phone. It is a car. The car has the most economic clustering effects, positive economic clustering effects than any other product that one could buy at the consumer level. Now, if you want to, look at it from a commercial level, then companies that go into, buy, planes, stuff like that, then you're talking about, or military grade, type equipment, space equipment or something like that, or satellites, then you're talking about things that are very, very complicated. But the average consumer, the most complicated thing that they could buy is a car. And it has it takes so many different types of engineers. That's why I said that these Bill Gateses and these Thiels of the world, they're very myopic. I mean, Thiel's smart. Bill Gates is smart, but they're not as smart as people think they are, because they weren't real engineers. Real engineers are the ones that worked at NASA or worked at Ford, not at frickin' Microsoft. I mean, just the word Ford, the term Ford in your head is like, I mean, you're thinking assembly line, stamp dies, you're thinking, motors, you're thinking gasoline, you're thinking oil, you're thinking all these things. You think Microsoft, and you're thinking of you're thinking of a floppy disk.
Yeah, a guy.
That's a little floppy disk, and that's Microsoft. Straight. And then So I mean, that's what I'm saying is that people.
I didn't know that, Paul. That was so interesting. I didn't know anything about that, about cars in that way. And being from the Midwest like we are, and you especially from Michigan, well, just speaking for myself in Wisconsin, like we just kind of grew up understanding that Detroit is really suffering, and it just the automobile industry was going down. And it's just amazing to see a guy like Musk is just amazing to me. He's a genius.
To me, Musk is kind of like the ethos. He is like the Steve.
He's such a genius, isn't he?
There's a Steve Jobs-esque thing about him.
Mm-hmm.
Musk is way smarter than
the
Steve
way
Jobs.
He thinks about the world is so unique. And I read his biography. I recommend people read that. It's really thick, but it's super good. No wasted space in there, and it makes you really want to go and change the world, really, and do some things. So I'd recommend people check it out.
I like him, especially with the Solar City concepts, the SpaceX concepts, and the Tesla.
How did nobody think of Solar City before?
Right. I mean, I like his style of that.
Yeah.
Once he started treading with the Neuralink, I thought that was, here's the problem with this is the problem with him.
Yeah.
He's somewhat like a singularity university type, where he's pushing transhumanism. And that's dangerous.
Do you believe in transhumanism?
I don't believe
at all. No. Not even a little bit?
No. I don't think there's anything positive about transhumanism.
How would you define it? Because isn't technology transhumanistic?
Well, I mean, technology can be used as a tool, but if you start to integrate your body with the technology, you become a transhumanist. And if you become a transhumanist, you're less human, you're more technology. The technology is more biological, and the biology is less. The biology becomes more technological.
So you don't think using technology to better your body and your mind is transhumanist?
Only if you integrate it. If you integrate it to your body, physically integrate it. If you're physically touching it or remotely affecting you biologically, like a wave affecting your thinking. Let's say they could create a wave, and that wave would enhance your thinking. Then you have become a transhuman.
That's fucking scary, because then you can control people's thinking.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the point that I'm making. Is transhumanism is.
And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Paul, but I've noticed that especially when I'm talking to other guys, because I've read that when males and females interact, their brain waves are actually they're not in sync. But when males interact with males and females, likewise with females, their brain waves, they go in sync. And I've noticed several times over my lifetime, and this is completely subjective, N equals 1 sample size, but it seems like people can sense your thoughts. Have you ever noticed that, Paul?
I think, I've seen that. That. But the question is how? I don't understand the mechanism. I don't understand the mechanism. Yeah, but I don't get it.
Isn't it weird? Like one time I was in Amsterdam. Quick story, and we were drinking. I was drinking with my best friends, also Jewish. Not that that matters,
Mhm.
but him and his brothers. And I was at this point, I'm like the point where I'm not talking that much. I was that level, but I'm just listening, and I'm like, wow, this conversation is good. And I'm like a step ahead. I'm like, what if they go here with the conversation? This is really interesting. And they steer that way. And this happened for like 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm like, whoa, and I'm like so smashed I can't speak, but I'm just thinking about, yo, am I controlling this conversation, you know? And I remember it like the next day, I was like, dude, that was weird last night. It's like they could feel my thoughts, you know, and sense them, and that's why they spoke that way. It's like, you know, we're all in the same wavelength. So because of that, any new waves that penetrate, they affect everybody.
Oh.
I don't
You
know.
know,
I don't know the science.
you know, the question is there some quantum entanglement with the firing of the neurons? I mean, there's some researchers that think this way. There's a researcher, his name is Hameroff, Dr. Hameroff and Penrose, Dr. Penrose, where they think that microtubules are actually some quantum state.
Hamerov and what was the other one?
Hameroff,
Okay.
Hameroff and Penrose. And, you know, they talk about microtubules being, they're not binary system. It's not a binary process, but it's more of a quantum process. So it's tied into quantum entanglement. So that would explain the mechanism. Is it, you know, I don't think anyone has done the research on that. I don't even know how you would do the testing to do it.
Yeah, right.
But they have written a couple papers about it. I haven't dived into it too deeply. I saw a documentary on Dr. Hameroff is a anesthesiologist, and so his theory is that we are alive and dead. We're alive when we have the neurons firing, and then we're dead when they're not. So we have this attachment to the quantum entanglement, and we're not, and we're on with the quantum entanglement, and we're not. And so when he anesthetizes individuals going into surgery, he's basically saying you're dead or almost dead. All right. And, you know, so you have a weak line, you know, you've heard flatline, right? Well, that's like you're dead. But, you know, in a normal state where you're awake or even when you're sleeping, you're dead, you're alive, you're dead, you're alive, you're dead, you're alive, you're dead, you're alive. And then you got this wave.
Yeah.
Right. But when it's that flat line, you no longer have enough alive features with the quantum entanglement. So you are no longer, at least in this realm, connected with the other realm. Then the question is, what happens to the soul? You know, the religious would say the soul departs the body and goes to this other realm where the quantum entanglement is connected, or what these waves are connected to. The body keeps the soul in it, but you know, this is all speculation. But they've written a couple papers on it, and that they think that the microtubules within the cells are actually the computational feature. So the question was, are the singularity guys? They think, well, if you can have a computer that can model about 80 billion neurons, then you will have the brain capacity of a human being. And Hameroff and Penrose is saying you won't, because that modeling is assuming binary with 80 billion. And they're saying that you have millions or billions of microtubules per cell. And so it's millions or billions times 80 billion. So by the time a computer can have those level of computations, you're not going to have AGI, artificial general intelligence. So there's this battle.
Why won't you have it?
Because the computers won't have that computational power yet. Because they're saying that the computational power in a cell is so much larger than what, quote, the computer scientists think. Because of this quantum state. Okay. Because in a quantum state, you got different spins.
Which we can't.
It's not an on and off. It's not just an on and off. There's like 4 states, if I understand it right. There's 4 states. So for each possibility, you know, for binary, it's on or off. For a quantum state, my understanding is that it's 4 state. It's potential 4 states.
Is it a spectrum?
Well, no, it's like
Or is it
it's
just
four
four
different
phases?
it's
Yeah.
four
Okay.
different phases.
Okay.
So and we have so many of these microtubules plus so many cells in just the neuron, assuming that all of our thinking is just the brain.
Yeah.
Right? But let's just assume that, that it doesn't have any sort of connection with other tissue. Let's just say it's just the brain that does all the thinking.
Cartesian duality.
So the brain is only doing all the thinking. Hammeroff and Penrose's main thesis is the computational power of a neuron is so much bigger than just the on-off of a neural connection to another neuron. Because it's the synaptic cleft that is creating this connection to other neurons, and that mosaic of on-offs creates a thought. Well, there's also a mosaic of computations that are taking place within the microtubule that are allowing for this on-off thing to happen.
Yeah.
So they're stating that the computational power of the brain is far, far more than just 80 billion neurons.
Far greater than we.
So
can
it's 80 billion
measure.
times times the average number of microtubules you have in a neuron.
Wow. Related to that, there's this article I read on a blog. I can't remember the blog, but it was about Elon Musk and this guy. He met him, and he was saying that Musk believes, as it pertains to consciousness in animals, so humans
just anyone that has a dog could see that there's I'll call it a soul. There's a soul in a dog.
You think so?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Well, he says that
I don't know about cats. But dogs
sleeping on my bed right
now.
now.
I'm not a big fan of cats because I'm allergic to cats. Actually.
Oh, you are? Okay.
I just like their dander. I mean, I just like start having
I like them because they don't need as much attention.
Yeah, I mean,
they just chill while you're working, and you don't have to get up and walk them quite as often.
Yeah,
so
I just like my personality is more a dog personality.
I love dogs too, though. And when I was younger, I used to prefer cats, but man, I've fallen in love with dogs as I've gotten older. I just didn't realize their intelligence when I was younger, and I think that's
they pick up the emotions of an individual.
It's crazy. It's crazy, and I've read also that they're evolving their eyes and the muscles around their eyes to emote more fully because of their interactions with humans and the eye contact we make with them. I was like, wow, that's insane. But just going back to what we're saying about Musk and consciousness, he might have changed his thinking on this, but this guy wrote that Musk thinks as far as it goes with humans and other animals, that it's binary. So they, as far as I know, don't have some sort of soul or whatever you want to think. Whatever makes us different from animals, he thinks it's binary in terms of consciousness. Whereas this writer, he thought it was a spectrum. And I am not sure. I think it's a bit of both, to be honest, because when you think about it, well, I was reading this book, Aragon, which I don't know if you've ever read it, but he talks about it and he explains that when he's turning into an elf, and I might lose people, but he senses all of the animals around him, all of the insects around him, and he closes his eyes and he's getting these powers and he sees them as lights, right? And he sees the ants as little tiny lights, and then the cat on my bed would be a bigger one. Humans would be even bigger. These kind of like pulsating orbs of energy due to their consciousness, whereas an ant's on the one end, hypothetically, and humans are on the other in terms of brain consciousness. So he thinks of it in terms of a spectrum, while as Musk thinks of it as humans are humans and then animals are animals.
Well, in a Jewish perspective, we have the idea of 5 souls. Humans have 5 souls, while other animal species have 4.
Wow, I've never heard of this.
And the idea is that the body itself is the lowest soul. I think it's Ra. It's pronounced Ra. But there's 5 different souls, and the highest level is the one that like attaches to God. And there's an intermediate levels. so for animals, they have souls. They have a body soul that stays with the decaying body when it dies. And that soul is like that's like a life force soul, but not personal, not it's a life force soul.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like spiritual soul.
Physiology.
It's not like a spiritual soul. So this spiritual soul that I'm talking about, the highest level, that's what humans have. So if you like a dog, you would see that there is that life force soul, and then these three other souls components to it that will go to a different plane. So it's somewhat. I don't think it's it is somewhat of a spectrum, but I think it's quantum spectrum. You know, they're discrete packets. So
and what's the soul that we have that they don't? What's the difference?
The soul that we have that they don't.
Yeah, because you said we have.
So we have this
the
highest level soul.
Okay.
Is the spiritual soul that is more like the realization, like a dog. I don't think we haven't proved it, but at least from our perspective, the dog doesn't seem to need to have the desire or the need for prayer.
Yeah.
But why do human beings have the desire or need for prayer?
Mm-hmm.
So it's to feed the soul. People have said, "Oh, you need to feed your soul." This is what they mean. You know, to feed the body is to feed the lower soul.
Yeah.
To feed the spiritual soul is through prayer or knowledge of, you know, of the divine realm.
Yeah. It's like a hierarchy of souls.
Yeah. So animals don't have that, but these other layers, like kindness, you do see a certain level of kindness in higher level of animals, in higher level animals.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see kindness in lower level animals. So their level of soul is diminished as you go down to the more primal species. More, you know, if you start going down to a microbe, you're not going to have these other layers of souls. So as they evolve, through evolution, there is going to be another layer of a soul layer. And when it hits the next boundary, that quantum boundary, then you're going to have, you know, a whole set of new cognitive function and consciousness. So a quantum point would be consciousness. Cognition is the number of neurons. So the number of neurons will get you to a certain point. Then you reach a critical point, that quantum point, and then you have a new layer of soul. Now the question is, are we maxed at 5? Or do we, as we evolve slowly into a new species, do we get a 6th layer?
So just we like turn into angels or something?
Well, maybe, I don't know. You know, I mean, Jews think of the angel realm is you still there? Yeah, you know, Jews think
I had to let the cat out.
Yeah, you know, the Jews have there's a realm, the angel realm, and the angels don't have will. They can do things, but they do things because it's been passed down to do it. So they're jealous of us because we have free will. We somewhat are jealous of them because they seem to be able to transcend time and move back and forth and seem to live forever. I don't know if they live forever or not. I don't know. I'm not an angel, but you know there are these different layers. So evolution.
Do you practice, Paul?
Do I practice what?
Yeah. Judaism, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But you know, there's these layers of, so and this is very Kabbalistic what I'm saying. You know, there's these, you know, the Yetzirah, the kind of But there's a soul. There's a soul. There are different soul layers in these angelic layers.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, Paul, if it's okay, about some other big players, because we're hearing a lot about us and China almost exclusively, and I hope it's not too touchy in terms of what we were just talking about, but Russia and Israel, I wanted to know your thoughts on and how they're playing out, because they both seem to me to be playing it quiet. I mean, I know Israel just asked the U.S. for more aid, but I mean, in the headlines, all you see is China and the U.S., but I can't imagine that they're just sitting idly by.
Well, wait, so the Russia and Israel. I know Israel is concerned about China because of the One Beltway going through the Middle East and how the hegemonic power in the North Africa. Russia is concerned about the U.S. and its hegemonic power in the Middle East and its stance against Iran.
It's probably concerned about China too, huh? From the other way.
I mean, but are you saying that there is some alliance between Russia and Israel?
No, I asked about them in particular just because they're big dogs too, and
Okay.
it's not just us in China.
So you're not insinuating that there's an alliance between Russia and
No, not necessarily. I mean,
okay,
France, France too is another big dog. India has nuclear weapons, but India doesn't really have the economic power that we have, or China or Israel.
Yeah.
I
think they're all of them are concerned. All of them are concerned with China. I mean, that's why I keep on saying that I think we should be buddying up with Russia to have a two-front war on China. Now, I talked to a guy that was an ex-military guy, and he was saying, oh, you don't need to do that. And he's been a military guy for a long time. And SOCOM, which is Special Operations.
Navy.
He was saying, oh, we don't need to do that because they just are they are a natural enemy to China. So China will always be worried about Russia. And I think it would be just better geopolitically to have a more front stage alliance with the United States than have a front stage alliance between Russia and China and have a backstage alliance with the United States and Russia. I just think that it would be a better geopolitical move to just front stage it than assume that
with China. It doesn't make any sense, especially with Israel being pretty close to them too, and the U.S. and Israel being such strong allies. But I think they actually sent some.
But the United States should take this opportunity and bring Russia in its orbit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not to villainize, to vilify the Russians. It's actually, I see them as allies, not. But the thing is communism. See, this is the strange thing with war, is you can have an enemy, but they're your ally because you have a bigger enemy.
Yeah.
And the bigger enemy is China. They are similar. China and Russia are similar because of communism. But
the history, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but Russia is more closer to Western civilization than it is to Eastern civilization. So there's a common civilization thread.
Yeah,
Russia
they're more similar
us.
to us. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is that they're better off being in our orbit than theirs.
Yeah.
And then if they're in our orbit, then you can slowly unravel communism and bring in capitalism into Russia. I think capitalism can work in Russia, but they tried it. When the Berlin Wall fell, I think they were trying to fast track capitalism into Russia. Shock therapy kind of capitalism, and I think it there were too many institutions that had to unravel, that it caused a lot of havoc in their banking system. And then they kind of like have like a quasi capitalistic society. So, and it led to Putin because of the shock therapy, economic shock therapy. If they didn't do economic shock therapy, because with economic shock therapy, what happens is the private sector starts to take over the resources when there's default. Come in, give them loans, they default in the loans, and you start acquiring the oil reserves. So, or resources. So Putin rises to power because of shock therapy, economic shock therapy. So we should have been much smarter and much more long-term and said that we would have a more peaceful world and actually more economic connection with Russia, back and forth with global trade. If we didn't do that shock therapy, they thought shock therapy would speed it, and it was professors from Harvard that were promoting the shock therapy, and it didn't work. It was a complete failure, and it led to the problems that we have now. Shock therapy gave us Putin.
I don't know anything about shock therapy. What
it was is as they fell, they needed help to try to reboot their economies, and all the Harvard types, and even Chicago school came in, and they were instituting these policies, and it was a play to push capitalism, but it was capitalism where if you default, they're going to take the resources. And the Russian people were thinking, oh, this is just the capitalist pigs trying to take our property. And it just there was a resurgence of communism because of shock therapy, and it led to Putin. That's my take on Putin, why Putin came to power. If they didn't do shock therapy, you would probably have more representative government there. So Americans didn't play the long game like the Chinese played.
Yeah.
And they placated to like the Goldman Sachses of the world, where they thought that they would be able to win on giving the bonds and giving the loans out, and then when they start to default, because what happens, you're an underwriter. When you're an underwriter, you make commissions. So you make money on the commissions of underwriting to reboot the economy in Russia. And Goldman Sachs would be involved, and then they would make their profit by underwriting it and dealing with the fees. And then if they defaulted, then they would get the property. And now we're talking about oil reserves, and it was the shock therapy sped the process of Putin getting into power.
Yeah, it was a reaction to it.
Yeah, I think so. I just think it was bad policy. It was bad policy. It needed to be titrated. It needed to be somewhat slowly implemented.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't do the shock therapy. The shock therapy was a failure, and it led to the geopolitical problems that we have today. Because if we didn't do shock therapy, and there was more global trade between us and Russia, there wouldn't have been so much global trade between the United States and China China wouldn't have grown so much, and the hubris would have been less, because they would need more time to grow. But China became the one-stop shop for America, and it's cheap products.
Yeah, now they're on their way to be number one. I mean, they just passed us in a couple categories. It's crazy seeing them. Speaking of compound interest and nonlinear thinking, if you look at China's rise over the past 5 years, it's like 5-10 years ago, you're like, oh, they're definitely doing better, but I don't think they're a problem. Even like 4 or 5 years ago, and then now, you see the compound interest and that exponential growth hit a tipping point, and now we're seeing that with this pandemic too, them just taking care. taking advantage of the whole situation. But yeah, as far as Russia, I didn't know anything about that, so I'll definitely read more about
I
that.
read it's tied into something. The acronym's FSU. I think it's the FSU. But I wrote about it in my pre-dissertation work years ago. I mean, you're talking about
FSU fuck shit up.
fuck shit. Well, no, but yeah, there's an acronym for it. It's dealing with their banking system. I can't remember what it means, the acronym. I wrote it like 10 years ago. I'd have to research it a little bit, but I wrote a little bit about this concept that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I learned glasnost, openness, and perestroika, and before that, de-Stalinization. I might have went over it, but I just forgot it. But
yeah, it's one of those things that if you don't, if you're not using it, you lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, their banking system, if I remember right, was called the FSU.
Okay.
And they were restructuring the FSU, or they were instituting a new FSU. And this was tied. No, this is Russia, and this was tied into the restructuring after the fall of communism, or the fall of Russia.
Why won't it die, Paul? Why won't communism die?
Why doesn't it die? I mean, well,
say in the West. I mean, maybe you don't have to answer in the East.
It only works. It doesn't even work. But I mean, the only way it's on life support because it has the ability to extract resources with capitalist countries that need those resources. If the resources go, it completely falls apart.
Yeah.
So it's a one-trick pony. Russia is oil. There's not, or gas, oil and gas industry. There's nothing else about Russia. Vodka maybe, but that's about it. So you can't run the whole economy on vodka. Well, maybe you can, but I mean, but the thing is that Russia, you don't think of like a Russian car, right? You don't think of like Russian computers. You don't think about Russian cell phones. It's oil. It's oil. So there's very little that you can say it's like, okay, that's something that Russia makes.
Yeah.
So it's really the whole oil play and the need for oil. And so people gain power. They have enough oligarchs that they can, pull strings. They make so much money to keep the power in power that it's sustained that way. It's not the will of the people. It's the will of a very select few.
Yeah.
Now and then because they don't have civil liberties and the right to bear arms and all these things, that it's hard for them to uprise, because if there is any uprising, then they're sent to a gulag or shot in the street or whatever. Yeah. So it's very, and that's the concern that I have with this country is that we're slowly moving to that kind of mentality. If you have governors that say you shouldn't have guns, that we're moving towards the same type of government system that Russia has.
And you reminded me of something I was going to say earlier. As far as you were speaking about the three branches of government and the legislative overstepping, one of the Supreme Court justices in the state of Wisconsin, a woman, I believe her name is Rebecca Bradley, she compared the use of powers now in trying to force people into the stay-at-home order to the time during World War II. The case was Korematsu versus the United States and the internment of the Japanese Americans during that time, and how that case was won by the United States government versus Korematsu, and made it legal to intern Japanese Americans. And I guess Trump was trying to do something similar with a case. Was it Trump versus, I can't remember it, but he got shot down with regards to that. But I found it interesting that a Supreme Court justice compared this period of time to World War II in that context.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of similarities to World War II, World War I. I think we're moving towards a war. I think we're not.
You're wrong, Paul. I really hope you're wrong. And
well, I wish I'm wrong too, but I mean, I just.
Well, then I have to go fight.
Well,
I don't know. You won't have to. I mean, maybe I won't have to.
It's not a. It's well, here's the problem: is we're at a point. It's not about age. It's about if you're a living being and standing up. See, this is the thing: is that we're at a crossroad, and if we don't fight for our Constitution and our flag, we're going to lose it. It's not like Vietnam where just burn your draft card and everything's going to be hunky-dory because it was a proxy war.
Yeah, you can always just come home, right?
Right. This is not a proxy war. This is here. This is, if you don't engage, you will lose. It's not like, well, I don't feel like fighting in a foreign, proxy war, and it's not going to change really the overall lifestyle of an American. This is like World War II. People had to fight, or there would be fascism all over the world.
Yeah,
we could have lost. The United States could have lost big time.
Yeah, Hitler made several mistakes.
Yeah,
several big mistakes.
I know, and we were lucky. And the reality of the situation is the United States didn't win World War II.
The Russians did.
Russia won World War II. Mm-hmm. We happened to just be,
we
at
came
the right place at the right time.
Yeah, right.
Right. So
it was really perfect timing and kind of ingenious how they waited as long as possible until they got into the war, and with that foreknowledge of Pearl Harbor coming. That's extremely controversial as well. Yeah, it's very comparable.
So people need but we have to. There's certain times where you have to fight. Fighting fascism is one of them. Fighting proxy wars in Vietnam, maybe not so much. I can understand why that there was a logic to it. I get the logic, but it's way more rational to think of fighting this domestic problem that we have against a government forcing unconstitutional things onto us, and that's where the real battle is.
Yeah, and that's part of the oath too, is defending against enemies, foreign and domestic. And that includes your government if need be. But I hope it doesn't resort to any sort of extended violence or mass violence.
Well, if it gives us less government and more freedom, then the violence has to begin.
Yeah,
this is what people playing patty cake is over. I mean, we've tried it, and it's done. The idea of that there's this we are right at that crossroad where if Governor Cuomo, I'm going to try to boil this down very simple so I don't sound like a PhD. If Governor Cuomo institutes forced vaccines, there will be an uprising in New York State, and
I would hope so.
There will be an uprising in New York State, and it'll go kinetic, and then police officers will be killed. There will be citizens that will be killed, and there will be so much civil unrest that it's going to be more coordinated. There will be a more coordinated effort. There will be a civil war within states. There will be and then when that goes, and they try to protect the governor, what's going to happen is the militia group is going to kill Governor Cuomo.
Well, I mean, those types of groups will definitely take advantage of the situation. And I mean, that's the thing too, is people don't realize is there are people out there who are waiting for this to pop off because they want to engage.
Well, like for example, during the Civil War, they were trying that, if the Confederate Army could have gotten a hold of Lincoln, they would have killed Lincoln. If the Union Army was able to get a hold of Jefferson Davis, they would have killed Jefferson Davis.
Yeah.
This is the point I'm making. Once you go into a civil war, whoever's creating the tyranny from your perspective, and you get a hold of them, they are no longer going to be viewed in a well, here's your civil liberties, and you're going to be, you're going to go through a normal a normal court process, that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is the dangerous thing that the governors don't understand, is that they are eroding our civil liberties to a point where if an uprising takes place and it goes kinetic, there's probably going to be a very strong push, and there'll be a momentum that the police in that state would not be able to stop. And I don't believe the military, because it's going to be all over the country when it happens. It's not just going to be in one little city. If it's all over the country, the military will stand down and allow it to happen. Because
I mean, there would be a bloodbath otherwise.
Well, yeah. I don't believe that the military is going to engage against the citizens when they're saying they're trying to protect their constitution and their civil liberties and prevent forced vaccines. But what will most likely happen is people like Governor Cuomo will be killed. They would be hung and torn apart, and the savages of war would be shown. The things that happened to Mussolini would happen to Governor Cuomo.
Yeah, and I think the Coast Guard or the National Guard would come in before that.
No, I don't think so.
You think it would happen that quickly?
I think they would stand. I think they would stand down, assuming depending on the size of the uprising. If the uprising is just a few hundred, yeah. But when the uprising is the whole country, when the uprising is happening in every town,
there's a tipping
every
point,
state, there's a certain point where they're going to have to stand down.
Even just people walking outside, I think, would send a message in large groups. You don't have to go get a weapon. And I'm not trying to instigate or plan anything like this, but I do know that in London they're planning a huge protest. I think. Oh, did it already happen? It might be next month actually. Let me double check on that. But yeah, you do see these protests organizing, not just here in the States, but other places.
The protesting needs to be peaceful until the government doesn't do what you're telling them to do. And they do the forced vaccine. Let's say you have a government that wants to institute a policy, right? And they didn't allow for proper voting of that policy to let the citizens to decide if they want that policy or not. And it's easy to do. People can just go to the voting box and decide if they want to institute that policy or not. Let's say they didn't do that. And there's a lot of uprising that takes place in the United States saying that they don't want these forced vaccines. But let's say the governors force the vaccines on the citizens, all right? They already tried it peacefully. There is no other recourse than war because the forced vaccines is not an option. This is where the governors don't understand the point that I'm making. You go down this road, you're gonna get killed.
There's gonna be blood.
They're gonna stand down. The governors stand down and stop this from happening, or the citizens are gonna kill you. Because there is no other recourse. Because they've tried it the peaceful way. The way it's working here is that you do it peacefully and you rise up, occupy America, and bring up the awareness.
Yeah.
If the governors and the federal government stand down, then and do what we've been protesting for, which is no decaching, no forced vaccines, E7 surveillance is turned off. The military grade equipment no longer is available for the police. No drones for the police. And we roll back to a pre-9/11 day where the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the TSA, Homeland Security is heavily truncated.
Yeah.
That's saying eliminate.
There's
heavily truncated, and there's oversight.
Yeah. And
there is a trust busting of the banking industry, where the big five banks are busted up and they go regional. They go regionally. So
credit unions.
We're more robust. We're not as fragile.
We don't have that pressure.
And during that,
you can just
and when you're trust busting those banks, you have now what you're doing is you're weakening the control of the Federal Reserve. And then now what you can do is take that Federal Reserve and say, okay, now we're going to have major oversight. When you do these types of special discount window repos, it's audited and it is conveyed to the public. And that's the key. It's conveyed to the public on what you are doing in real time. So there's a heavy auditing of the Federal Reserve. All these things that I'm saying, if they don't happen, then, and we state this in a peaceful way, but if all these things that I'm saying have created systemic risks that erodes your civil liberties, every single one of these items.
Yeah, I agree.
We do this peacefully, and they don't listen, and they continue to march down the road of tyranny. There is no other recourse other than to rise up and destroy and burn down the government that they are creating, because the government that they are creating is unconstitutional. It is our obligation and our right to reboot America, to bring back America, to save the Constitution. Because if you do their method, they are going to tear it up. They're going to burn it down.
Yeah.
So
and Paul, we have to stay together, Paul. We have to stay together because they're trying to split us up, just like they have been for the last 4 or 5 years. They're trying to divide us and polarize us even more, so we don't have that team advantage over them. You know, that collective team advantage. They're trying to turn it into the election thing, right? Like that matters when we're in a totalitarian dictatorship at the end of the day. You know,
I just wish. I honestly wish. Doing these things and me talking, you know, free form like this has developed a certain skill set. And we need people that are thinking like me that are going to run for office at the presidential level and tell it how it is. It's not about taxation. It's not about giving you free health care. It's not about, making Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security stronger. That's all bullshit. All right. All those policies are bullshit. They are so small potato compared to this big picture that I'm talking about. Because everything that I'm saying is predicated. All that little stuff that they're worried about won't even happen, because these big things will be eroded. And you won't even have the resources to have these programs anymore. So to save the country, it's to forget about those things and to focus on these things that I mentioned about the biopatriot and rolling back to a pre 9/11 day and all those features. But I envision in 2024 someone like myself that is more forceful and saying that this is their Achilles heel. Their Achilles heel is that they aren't speaking to the Constitution. They're speaking down on the citizens.
Yeah.
And if you attack that Achilles heel, those politicians, they'll lose at the ballot box, because people like me that don't even have any experience in the legislature or in politics, we would be able to get elected very easily, because we just talk. We don't need a poll. They talk by polling. They talk by this. All right, people that we're trying to get a certain constituency to vote for us. So what do they want? Okay, they want this, and that, and therefore we're going to find a social program to give them so they vote for me. No, you don't even need a poll. All you need to do is just say we're taking fucking back the country because our Constitution is going to get eroded. It's really easy.
You could spectator sport, not based on merit, right? So there's as long as you're good at theatrics, you can be a politician, right?
Yeah. But people like myself could be very we could add a dimension of theatrics.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have that internal, the intelligence, the integrity, the ethics, in addition to communication ability.
Shiva, some of the things that he's saying resonate with me. Some of them don't. But he's probably one person that needs to get into Congress or the Senate and help through the problem. But I don't think he has the charisma that I'm talking about at the presidential level. He's not a presidential level type person. He may be a senatorial type person, but he's not executive. He's not executive level. There's a missing charisma about him.
Yeah, it's for that very same reason. Not only that, but just the mental decline that I don't understand the choice for Biden. It seems to me it's only because they can control him that they want him there.
I think
how do you vote for him?
No,
how does anybody with a rational mind vote for him?
No. It's the same thing that they thought was going to happen with Reagan. They thought, get an old guy in there, he'll kick the bucket, and then we got the bonesman in. But he didn't kick the bucket. They even tried to kill him, and he didn't die.
Yeah, who was that?
Right?
Manning or Bradley? What was his name?
No,
Brady. Brady Law.
Yeah. So I think what it is it's that candidate that they will kick the bucket, and
they can slide the VP in.
And right? It's the VP. You got to look at who the VP is. That's who really they think is going to get it. Yeah. Biden's not going to last for more than a year in the presidency. And I personally think he has brain. I personally think he has brain damage from his surgeries that he's had.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know if he'll make it to November. So I just, even people who are decidedly Democratic their whole lives, how can you look at the evidence of that man speaking and justify, make an argument to me or anyone?
Yeah, but if they're a Democrat, I'm not sure if they can. Is there really a justification to be a Democrat? Period.
Well, let's talk about it, Paul, because we're both from the Midwest, and sounds like you grew up Republican.
Yeah.
I grew up Democrat. Now, granted, I am quite a bit younger than you, but politics was also something that I was never really interested in growing up either, it's funny. It seems, I'm not saying I'm good at it necessarily, but it seems like the people who are most suited for it are they're just interested in other things. I think you would be an excellent politician, Paul, but you're obviously you're an academic and a scientist in that too, but just an example of that, people who don't go into politics often are the best suited to do that, and the opposite seems to be true as well.
Yeah, my formative years is the 80s. So I mean, I'm thinking anti-communist, I'm thinking Reagan, I'm thinking that kind of thing. So
okay.
But so I'm more, I view the Democratic platform as a socialistic platform, and the socialistic platform is one step away from communism. So I make it it's very simplistic.
You think Bernie's a communist?
Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he did his honeymoon in Russia. And when he came back, he said on how great Russia was. I mean, that's a communist. And that was in the heat of the Cold War. I mean, that's not recent. I mean, we're talking right in the middle of the Cold War. I mean, he's saying this crap.
That's like going to China right now.
Yeah. And saying the CCP is awesome. I mean, really, that's how crazy it is.
I mean, it pretty much is.
But what is to his credit is he's been consistent his whole career.
I mean, I don't. When people say that, Paul, I don't think that's a compliment. That's my opinion, and I know.
Well, at least you know where he's coming
with
from.
That.
Well,
yeah, but you have to, and he's not wishy-washy, which I understand, and he's not two-faced, and you can say that. But there's also the other end of the spectrum, which is dogma and the inability to evolve one's thinking due to closed-mindedness.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's a good point. But I mean, I don't trust communists.
I don't trust him either.
I don't trust communists, and I don't trust socialists. I just believe in the idea. I like Rand Paul. I like the concepts he says. I want less government. Less government is better government.
I might just vote for him this year, man. Seriously, and
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
he's liberty, right? He's the only one that's about liberty.
right. But the thing is it's not about just voting. It's about winning. you know, and
Okay, you
there's,
say that, Paul, though, but like, I mean, unless we vote for a third candidate at some point, there will never be a legitimate third candidate, will there?
well, that's a good point. But the thing is,
Say you're in a state like that you know is going to be red or you know is going to be blue. You might as well vote for a third candidate, right? You might as well vote for Ron Paul or yourself or your buddy or something,
right.
rather than not show up at all because your state's going to be
Well, at
red
least
or
you're
blue
making
anyways.
a statement. What it is.
Yeah, you're expressing yourself in some way. And
See,
Ryan
here,
Dawson actually expressed this to me that that's his opinion. I was like, well, what if you don't know who to vote for, or you just go and write anybody, just go write anybody's name.
yeah. I mean, if you do that enough in enough elections,
Mm-hmm.
then that party will start to gain momentum and become a
Traction.
force.
Mm-hmm.
And then you no longer are just writing in something to make a statement.
And it becomes real. Yeah.
Right.
And if a bunch of people do that, like, who, Trump would probably win anyway, but then you would get what? I don't know, 10%, 15% maybe, who vote for Ron Paul or Paul Cottrell or anyone.
I've had people that actually have told me, Paul, you should run. Not now, but like in the future. And I was like, I wouldn't want to do that. I really wouldn't want to do it. But
That'd be so stressful, wouldn't it?
It'd
be so hard to enjoy yourself ever.
Well, not just that. It's just like there's such. I mean, you're talking about the ultimate trolling. The ultimate trolling. I mean, goes on when you're like you're going to be when you're the president. You're going to be trolled so much. I mean, it's like YouTube to the billionth power.
Speaking of trolling and presidents, I actually didn't watch the debates, but I thought it was pretty cheeky how he brought in all of Clinton's old accusers and like put them right in front of Hillary. I didn't even know that, but I
thought it was awesome.
That's a good chess move right there.
Yeah, but that is the kind of thinking that we need. How can she get up on stage and say how she's for women's rights when she was trying to hush these people because it might damage her husband's career as the president? That's not women's rights.
I think she's actually more. I think she's more dangerous than Bill in some ways. Yeah,
but, I mean,
Bill is the he's
she wears the dildo. She
guy, right?
She wears the dildo and he takes it in the ass. I mean, fucking A.
Apparently, she's been caught with women in the past.
Caught, or it's just
like aides have walked in on her with women, I guess.
No kidding.
That's what I've heard. Ryan Dawson told me that.
I didn't know that. I heard that she swings that way, but I didn't know that there was.
I mean, you look at her and the way she behaves, it's not that hard to believe. She's not feminine at all.
The thing is, that's probably why Billy is the way he is, because he's not getting he's not getting anything at home. When you're not getting anything at home, you're going to look somewhere else. I mean, it's real simple. People, the thing is that if the woman isn't, if the wife isn't performing for the husband, or the husband isn't performing for the wife, they're going to look elsewhere, right? I mean, this is just human nature. So, so she created him, sleeping around with everybody. Because
in a way, I mean, they're just like they're Bonnie and Clyde, they're kind of codependent in ways that aren't even normal for normal marriages.
I don't understand how they can stay together.
It's so weird. I think it's strictly business. It's strictly for the money. It's strictly for the power. Because if they split up, they both lose, right? It's a lose-lose if they split up, and especially being politicians. And I don't know, man, like the Clintons, I feel like they're one of the best marketers and propaganda pushers. It's just, 2016 was such a watershed moment for many of us, and myself included. It just made me realize I have no idea what's going on. Like, I voted for Hillary, and, I was disappointed that she lost. Like, that's how out of touch I was with everything. I was just like, oh, yep, Democrat, let's write it in. Like, I voted for the first woman president. That's awesome. But Yeah, I'm glad Trump won now. In retrospect, I think things would have been worse. Especially, can you imagine this situation with Hillary at the helm? Like, that is scary. That is really scary.
Mm-hmm.
No?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
like,
it would be it would be much more of a federal crackdown on
oh yeah, it would be way
voters.
more authoritarian, and that's so backwards too. It's like you'd think that, well, not really. What liberals tend to like bigger government, yeah, but it's just the way that how they try to appeal to the common people, right, to the average man or the blue collar worker. But the Democratic Party doesn't really exist anymore, does it?
Well, there's not many blue collar workers anymore. I mean, there's
Yeah.
not many workers anymore.
Hmm.
We shipped out our manufacturing so much that they lost their base in a strange
Yeah.
way, and we're gonna reboot. We're gonna reboot manufacturing.
It's like our
in the United
entire
States.
economy was on, it was on credit, you know.
Well, it was on credit and life support, but I'm hopeful for America in the long term. In the short term, when we say long term, I'm hopeful for America in 5 to 10 years, or even longer. But but in the short term, I think that we got some serious problems, and that if we do it right, then the long term will happen. But if we do it wrong, the long term will not happen. You know, we have this opportunity to do things right, but if they decide to do things wrong, we're gonna have some rocky roads to travel on. It's so much easier to just get engaged and tell the representatives to stop this. And if there's enough of them, they won't do it. They'll stop. But if they don't engage or they don't listen, then we can't have forced vaccines. That's a no-no. Or tagging of any sort, either electronic
I
tagging
agree.
or
I agree. That's
or
so
or
backwards.
some biological tagging.
It's so un-American. The
Right.
whole idea.
But that's what they're pushing. This is what Cuomo is pushing.
Yeah, and they're not letting up, are they? It's relentless. It's just like it's like a slow, it's like the Chinese water torture, right? No pun intended. No pun intended. That was accidental. But it's like a slow drip of eventually they're gonna wear down. Okay, whatever. Like I just want to go back to work. Whether it's patience or complacency. That's what I fear is that's the tactic being used. And I agree with you, Paul. I think we should start, revving the engine up again and, just getting her going. It doesn't have to be Autobahn, highway, interstate speed, but, let's pull out of the driveway.
I want the internet highway speed. I want that Autobahn. I'm tired. I'm physically tired of being in shelter in place. I'm tired of it. There's an emotional component to it, but there's a frustration component of hearing our elected officials, pushing these policies that I think are unconstitutional. Now the question is, what does the citizens do? I think that there's a lot of areas in the United States that are going to uprise. The question is there going to be I call it the Tet Offensive? Are there enough of them happening at the same time?
Yeah.
Where it creates so much buzz that we get what we want peacefully. Because we're going to get what we want. It's the peaceful path or it's the violent path, but we're going to get what we want. That's for sure. But I prefer the peaceful path. But the thing is that's what these governors don't understand. The citizens are going to get what they want, not what the government is trying to push on them.
Yeah.
And it's not for debate. And if they don't,
well, they're not acting like that.
But the thing is that's the point. The citizens are getting more angry, and they're gonna start pushing back and start protesting. So hopefully this Occupy America movement at the grassroots level, where there's no centralness to it, just a central theme, the central theme is this idea of no Biopatriot Act and going back to a pre 9/11 day where you don't have this over militarization of police force, and you don't have this fragility in the banking system. These are all important components. It's not just forced vaccines.
Yeah.
If they don't listen, people are gonna. We can't take another shelter in place. We can't have another $4 trillion hit to the economy. They'll destroy us. It's
Well,
better.
maybe that's not
It's
part of
better
their
to burn
planning
down. It's better
anyway,
to burn.
Paul.
It's better to just do mass violence and just start burning shit down. I'm telling you, we cannot take another $4
Well, they're
trillion
both
hit.
going the same way anyway, aren't they? I mean, a Great Depression is going to end in violence, and starving people are going to act violently anyway.
That's a good point.
Once the
That's a good
the medulla takes over, it's just like, it's like you said, we're crossing the Rubicon in that sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the hypocrisy of militarizing the federal agents is like, we're not a police state. This isn't Central Asia. This is the West. We're the face of the West. We're the face of liberty, face of democracy, face of republics, and we should be. And this it doesn't seem like the way we should let our government behave. And I think our biggest obstacle is going to get people on our getting people on our side. And everyone on the same page, because I mean, even just talking with people in my family, I mean, it's just, maybe don't go for your family though. Go for friends and people you aren't related to, because politics is so salient, so contentious, and doing that might be bad for people's relationships.
Well, it's definitely bad for people's relationships.
Yeah. I mean, if that's
there's
the case,
there's a lot of division in families now.
Yeah,
but the same thing happened in the Civil War.
Yeah, it literally. And there's this awesome book which I didn't finish. It's at my grandparents' house. My grandfather has this book about crazy facts about the Civil War, and yeah, man, there was I think major generals that were brothers, like on opposite sides, and it's ridiculous. Literally, brother against brother, like full biological brothers were.
You got it.
On opposite sides, and
you got it.
It's husbands and wives, brothers and sisters. So it's an individual choice that people have to make, and I actually came to this realization this week, Paul, that I can't necessarily persuade anyone, even my family, even people I love and who share my blood. Now, that's not saying that I'm not going to die for them, protecting them, but as far as philosophy and understanding, you don't have to convince everyone, that you think the same way as you do. But I think you should try to get people to understand the possibility of very real danger to our Constitution, to this nation.
I agree. Yeah, we should shut it down because we've been talking for, I don't know, how many hours now?
I don't know.
We started at like 3:15 maybe. It's like 3 hours. Is that right?
It's 3:30 here, and we started at noon, right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That was awesome. That was definitely, I think that was definitely my most enjoyable chat I've had with you, Paul.
Let me shut it down here.